Welcome to Men on Trek, episode number 6, coming to you live from parts unknown, possibly Starbase 31. But we are
51.
51.
51.
They're
Isn't that Area 51?
They're going to storm 51.
Area 51.
We're back again. Captain James T. Palpatine, Captain Mark Dystrom, Lieutenant Audio Arthur, moving up the ranks because he's doing a lot of work.
Right. Thank you.
And yours truly, Admiral Looks Good in Red Keith. Back again with episode number 6. If you hadn't hit like and subscribe, we're kind of wondering what you're doing with your life. Tonight's episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Episode 4, Season 1, originally aired on September 22nd, 1966. An interesting episode because it's a soft reboot. Well, actually, it is a reboot. It's a second pilot for the series after the original pilot, The Cage, was tweaked per CBS at the time.
Is that what happened? Why did they have to do the second pilot?
No, they turned down the original.
They didn't like The Cage.
Did they really?
They didn't like Pike. They didn't like some of the other ancillary characters, so they went back and did a lot of rewriting, recasting. And
To Star Trek's credit, or to Roddenberry's credit, the footage of The Cage was reused, which has become one of my favorites. But this episode, the Where No Man Has Gone Before, is in my top 10.
So they used the original pilot. That's the Menagerie?
Yes.
And that's the only two-parter,
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yes. It didn't play well, and it's happened in other series, but Pike didn't play well. Some of the other things they didn't play well.
I liked Pike.
I did too.
Well, that goes to show you what happens when you're a suit.
Yeah.
You make those command decisions, and then the peons down the line decide that, oh, I really like that.
Yeah, decisions get made.
That's right.
Wish we could phase the suits.
That's right.
Here he goes again.
I didn't particularly like Spock's or Leonard Nimoy's choices in the Menagerie, and in this episode he was smiling, and
It's clear they hadn't quite figured out who Spock was yet. That's actually why I think I love this episode. All the little stuff that was unique to The Cage in this episode, the uniforms, the characters weren't quite who they came to be later on. The look and feel, a lot of the things we were talking about when we were reviewing the episode. The ship looks different inside.
right.
Inside, especially, sets are different. The original phaser is radically different than the phaser we came to expect. All of that for me is one of the reasons I really like this episode. And even some of the characters they introduced that don't make it into the regular series later on.
I remember being a kid and seeing this and thinking that this is what the show looked like 10 years prior to what its
Became
running
later.
was.
Right.
It's almost like it's the OG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the communicator goes from a bag phone
to a flip phone.
Yeah, one of the pocket mini flip phones.
Yeah.
And that communicator was huge.
It was huge. The buttons, the knob on it looked like the knob on a air conditioner on a Dodge Durango. It's like, it was huge.
But you get a view of the progression in a series from old tech to new tech, in essence.
Well, also what's impressive, and you see this in a lot of pilots, this was clearly a reboot, another try, and they did the pilot, and they obviously utilized a lot of elements from The Cage to get it done. But once this went over, once it was accepted, the budget clearly went up quite a bit.
Right.
Money has been allocated.
Yes.
Because it probably the most significant evolution was the establishment of the red shirt.
Yes, instead of the salmon pink brown
Salmon
shirt.
pink
It was mostly brown.
That was kind of
It was so close in color to the command shirt that you
unless they were standing next to each other, you couldn't.
could tell the difference.
I still want to credit Kelso with the first red shirt death.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think.
I don't know. Was Kelso's shirt red or was
Yeah, he was
Kelso
engineering.
actually-
He was an
He was
engineering
engineering.
guy.
Was he actually in the gold?
No, he was in red or
The
salmon,
salmon.
whatever it was.
He was in the salmon.
Somebody write in the comments what color you think that was. Yeah, there's
Oh, hold on. if you're going to do that, make sure you have a 4K TV when you watch it, so we get proper colors.
Yeah, at least. Yeah, high def makes all the difference.
Right.
But so we have No Man Where No Man's Gone before. The second pilot. And again, like I said, all the little things they hadn't quite figured out to me make it great. But the series finds the Enterprise heading towards, I guess, what you would call the edge of the galaxy, where the galactic barrier is, which is something that has stood the test of time in Star Trek. I think there's still a galactic barrier. They revisit it several times, and it's even been gone to in
it's almost
one of the movies.
It's like a mystic barrier because there's no energy, there's no radiation.
Right.
It's just it's more of a. It almost seems like it's a mental barrier that somehow affects ships.
It's the wall of God.
Is that what it is?
Seems like it. It's because Spock points it out in this episode. He says, and we've jumped ahead, of course, but Spock points it out in this episode. He says the sensor says there's nothing there, but the deflectors or the physical things of the ship say there is.
Mm-hmm.
And that nothing does a lot of damage to the ship. So, yeah, that somebody doesn't want you leaving the galaxy.
Well, let's start at the beginning.
Yeah, let's.
So they're Spock and Kirk are in the rec area.
In the rec room.
In the rec area, and they're playing chess.
Yes.
And Spock has that un-Vulcan grin upon his face that I'm about to win, Captain.
Yes.
And Kirk's looking away because he gets a call from the bridge. And then Spock's like, it's your move. And Kirk just offhandedly looks at the board and the tri-level chess. I bought one of those.
Did you really?
Yeah, I actually owned a tri-level chess.
Was it hard?
I couldn't. It was difficult to get the idea of the move from one place to another.
Okay.
And then to maintain your requirements in, how can I say it, your strategy, because you're looking at the board. It's not laid out for you easily.
Right.
But that's offhanded. Kirk looks and makes his move and wins the game. It's like, all Spock's vaunted logic. And Kirk at first asks the question, does that irritate you? And this is the first sign we see of Spock's non-emotion. Oh, you acquaint human emotion irritation. And then when Kirk wins, he goes, I think you know what it feels like.
Well, I was, if you look at it now, it's almost that Spock showed more emotions than Kirk did in that scene.
Yeah.
Kirk was just kind of like, I'm waiting for this to come through. And then he kind of has a little smile. And Spock's like, Spock's smiling. He says, I'll mate you on your next move. Kirk does the move, and then Spock gets a little irritated. But those original Spock eyebrows, man, 45 degrees on those things.
Yeah. And thick.
Wish they gifted those eyebrows to the Klingons later on.
That's right.
But yeah, Spock looks kind of wild.
Mm.
So the makeup is changed from the pilot to the
regular production.
Series, right?
Yes.
Right.
There was even and you can see it in the 4K. There was even some makeup choices to try to give Spock a little bit of a greenish hue.
Yeah.
To give his skin color a non-human appearance. They back off. Seems like they back off on it as the series goes on, but initially that was there.
And those uniforms. Ooh.
Yeah. Velour. With like almost a corduroy collar on some of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, some people weren't wearing their turtlenecks correctly. Dr. Piper being the chief offender.
Dr. Piper.
His was kind of rolled down. His was kind of rolled down around his neck.
Piper seemed like he was just trying to get off that ship at some point. He seems like he's been there way too long.
He had a bad feeling about this. as they say in another franchise.
Clearly Piper retired after this episode because you never see him again. So
what happens is after Kirk wins the chess game, he gets called to he's talking to the bridge, and there's a
transmission, a signal.
There's a signal, and they find a device, and they give the size of the device. It's too small to be a ship, and Kirk says, beam it aboard, and they do. They go down to the transporter room, and it's a buoy.
Old signal buoy.
Yeah.
From the Valiant.
Says it right on the top. Valiant.
Yep. So Kirk explains what the buoy is. That back in that day, it's 200 years ago. If the ship got into trouble, they would drop a buoy, and later on, somebody would come 200 years later and find it. And Spock makes the point, well, they just didn't drop it and move on. It looks like they were destroyed because of the damage.
The damage to the buoy.
To the buoy. And this goes to my second ship theory.
That's right. I don't know if it's a theory anymore. I think it's a law. I think we can call it a law.
You don't want to be first.
You don't want to be first.
But that's the whole mission. To go out and find new life.
But you really don't want to be
finding first. New life is hazardous to your health.
You want to be out there, but you want to be a day behind somebody.
Can you think about the first British soldier that went to the continent of Africa? And they're the first British guys out there, and they're in the boat, they're paddling, and a hippo comes out of the water. Being the first guy doesn't turn out very well. I'd rather be in the second boat.
Somebody's got to do it.
It's like the guy on patrol, going out there and figure out what's out there.
The guy on point?
Yep. Go.
Yeah.
And when he takes the fire, hey,
look, there's something there.
When Spock and Kirk get on the turbo lift to head towards the bridge, that's where we get introduced to Gary
Mitchell.
Gary Mitchell.
Kirk's friend.
And you know what always got me about Gary Mitchell was he seemed like he was more at ease on that ship than Kirk was.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Gary was just one of those guys. There was nothing wrong. And I guess you could look at it as he wasn't carrying the weight of command. He could just kind of do his thing.
Right.
My best friend is a captain. I can just slide around and enjoy life.
Well, it's interesting. He says, I heard worry in Kelso's voice, so I'm going to head up there.
Yeah, he's
looking out for.
He's taking responsibility.
Yeah, he's watching out for people.
He's one of those guys. He's like, I'm a clutch player, but I'm not carrying the weight, so it's all good,
I truly like the interplay between Gary, Kelso, and the captain.
Yes. And Spock's part of it too. Like even on the turbo lift, Gary's questioning Spock about the chess game, and Spock's like, Spock's kind of like he pulled off another one of those illogical moves, and Gary looks at Kirk. Kirk's like, Spock's a little upset with me.
Well, Kirk gives the thumb across the neck.
Thumb across the neck. Yeah.
The Kirk died. It gets you a feel that these guys have been together.
Right.
Yes.
They're a meshed unit.
Yes.
And, they work together very well. What you have out of the bridge crew with the navigator and what's the other word I'm looking for? Helmsman. There
Kelso,
we go.
helmsman, yeah.
So, and the captain and the science officer.
Yes.
And Scotty's there too. Maintaining as what Scotty does.
But even back then, wearing his salmon, Scotty's kind of an outsider.
Yeah, that's true.
You're right. He doesn't like Gary Mitchell feels so at ease. There's a point where Kirk asks him to open communication, do something, and he just takes the side of his hand and just kind of swipes the control panel.
Console, like.
Almost like it's a touch screen.
Yeah, I've done it thousands of times.
Yeah. But everybody out there are episodes where you can hear Sulu like hitting buttons and like there's a loud noise, and you see Gary Mitchell. He just kind of just sweeps his hand and he does it. He gives me the impression that this is a guy who's ready for his own command. He's just having too much fun right now, and he's hanging with his boy.
Yeah.
But he comes across as being ready to go. I see him much more comfortable and much more proficient than anyone. Even the way that he sort of settles into the helm, it's just kind of like he's just putting it on.
Yeah. It's like he's driving a Cadillac.
Absolutely.
He's got the lean going.
Yeah, he's got the lean.
He's actually the navigator. Kelso's on helm.
Yeah.
And Kelso, I always liked Kelso a lot.
Don't like him for too long.
Well, yeah. But I thought about that.
He's got the salmon shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
He does, and it's close enough to red to cost you your life.
Was there a red shirt in the pilot in Menagerie? Was there any red shirts that bought it?
Well, no, in the cage, no, there's no. It's those salmon shirts.
So Kelso is the first red shirt. I think.
Yeah,
no one dies in the cage. I don't think.
No,
Cage episode.
No one does actually.
Or should I say the Cage pilot?
Yeah. But no, what I noticed about Kelso when I thought about it, there's a reason he didn't carry forward, because he kind of was the Scotty guy. Scotty was there, but it was Kelso that was pulling everything off. It was Kelso that was putting everything together.
Yeah, it's
only on planet, because when he come back to the ship, Scotty's the one putting things together on the ship.
But even on ship, Kelso's an integral part of that process. He's
You're right. It's almost like Scotty was written into two characters, Kelso and Scotty.
Scotty's almost in the background on this one. His contribution is minimized because Kelso's there.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't go to the planet, but that's far.
Yeah,
that's a little far field. But as we look at it, one thing I liked about the Scotty character in this episode is when he's putting in the units that Kelso cannibalized from the planet, Scotty's got that crap-eating grin on his face. The ship is back up. Everything's fit, Kelso.
Scotty's still Scotty.
My ship goes good.
Scotty doesn't care that there's a guy down there who's evolving into something that can destroy part of the universe. He's just happy the ship's working again, because that's what he cares about.
Well, no, it's how Scotty cares. Scotty knows the ship needs to be working so you can run from the guy that's evolving into somebody that can damage the universe.
We're jumping around. We're far afield. So they get the beacon, and Kirk tells Spock to analyze the information and find out what's going on, and they find out the Valiant went through the barrier.
Well, they had an ion storm. Yeah, their engines were only impulse. They couldn't fight it. They got Valiant thrown out of the galaxy.
Outside of the galaxy.
Yeah.
And then the barrier,
and they turned around and came back.
The barrier did its damage upon the humans.
Yes,
and the Valiant came back,
killed 7 crew members,
and then they
killed 6 crew members.
Then they start to go through, and Spock's reading the information or receiving the information, and tells Kirk, the deaths that went on and those who recovered, and then there's this search for ESP information. And then it seems like the captain gives the order to destroy his own ship. And then you get the big music. Dun, dun, dun.
Right.
So at this point, Kirk's facing a decision. Do we proceed or what do we do? And he makes a statement that other ships will be coming this way. Other people will go outside of the barrier. Mm-hmm. We need to go ahead and do this so that we can figure out what's safe and what's not safe. Okay. So this is the scenario we're in now. Kirk has made the command decision that we're going to
attempt to
proceed. But what's interesting is before this, all of the executive staff comes up.
Department heads.
Department heads, yes.
And Sulu is in blue.
Yes, Sulu's there.
He's in the background.
Sulu's there, and he is Sulu.
And McCoy is absent.
He is Sulu.
Yeah. And McCoy is absent.
No McCoy.
There's some other guy.
Dr. Piper.
Dr. Piper.
Doctor, I'm ready for retirement, Piper.
And
but Sulu is the head of astrosciences in this.
Right. But it's once again, it's a throwback from The Cage.
Right.
Sulu's still there. He still made the cut for the second pilot.
Right.
His position has been changed a lot, but we have another female doctor
Dr. Daner.
Who no one's seen before, Dr.
Sally
Daner.
Kellerman. Yeah.
Elizabeth Daner.
Beth
Daner?
Or Lizzie.
Beth Daner?
Lizzie Daner.
Can you call her Lizzie? Can you call her Lizzie after she becomes a goddess? But
well, Spock is explaining everything.
Right.
And they get the information, and she walks down and she starts to have a conversation with Kelso. Not Kelso, excuse me. Mitchell.
Mitchell testing the waters.
Right. Well, she's a psychiatrist.
Yes.
And Mitchell says, well, you're in the job of improving the breed. And she throws back at him, no, I think that's what you're trying to do.
She said, I heard that's what you do.
Right. Individually. So Mitchell is also listed as a ladies' man.
And that later becomes Kirk's reputation.
That's true.
So it seems like Gary Mitchell's that big brother who, but he's actually not, because he was an underclassman to Kirk.
They're just
not even an underclassman, a student.
Right. They're really close friends. Mitchell is one step behind Kirk.
Several, actually. He's a lieutenant.
Ah, all right.
He's several steps behind but
that's 2 steps. Lieutenant, commander, captain.
Commander.
Commander. So 3 steps. Thank you.
3 steps.
That's why he's Admiral Redshirt.
Well,
you and I don't know about that stuff. We're out in the field flying ships.
Know your naval jargon.
So Dr. Dana and Mitchell have that conversation. As she walks away, Mitchell makes the comment of icebox.
Yeah. Walking freezer unit.
Walking freezer unit. It's the future. It's not an icebox anymore.
It's walking freezer unit.
But, and again.
Which she hears.
Yes.
She hears that.
Those psychiatrist ears are working. Yeah.
That's right.
She's offended.
It's inappropriate.
It is. But the dynamics again, because it's funny as we go through these episodes, when people think about Star Trek, they talk about Kirk like he's just this kind of superficial guy that went around chasing all these girls, but that's not what really happens in the episodes. But Gary Mitchell's totally that guy.
He is that guy.
He's totally that guy. Gary Mitchell.
Yeah, we find out things later on in the episode. You start to actually question the friendship.
He does. When we do it? We did it in Balance of Terror when the Romulan plasma weapon was coming. Kirk grabs Yeoman Rand.
Yes.
In this, Gary reaches out to Yeoman Smith.
Kirk didn't remember her name, and neither do I.
Smith or Jones?
Smith or Jones,
I think.
Yeah, and he grabs onto her.
Yeah.
And he's trying to hold. He's flying the starship through a barrier one-handed.
Yeah, he's navigating one-handed, and
yeah,
Kelso's over there working furiously, and he's holding the girl's hand.
Man, if I'm going to die, I'm going to hold on to my main squeeze. I'm sorry. You got a choice.
Red alert. Where's
what's wrong with that? If I'm going out, can't hold my woman's hand as I'm going out.
Admiral Redshirt, do you wanna clarify for the audience what the red alert?
When the red alert sounds, someone, usually Captain Daystrom, is expressing their heartfelt opinion about the world and all that there is,
which doesn't necessarily represent the views of Men on Track.
The views and opinions of Men on Track. Don't let our laughter be construed as consent.
No, it's not.
But no,
we are frowning as we are laughing.
Yeah, a little bit. But no, Captain Daystrom is correct. Gary Mitchell is demonstrating that he's probably the coolest guy on the ship. He's navigating one-handed. He's holding the yeoman's hand, and everything's just kind of cool over on that part of the bridge.
Her name is Smith.
Smith? Are you sure?
He calls her Jones, and she corrects it and says, "My name is Smith."
Mm-hmm.
Captain don't even know his yeoman, but Mitchell does.
But Mitchell does.
He knows her.
He knows her. He does know.
Don't hit that button.
He's acquainted. He's acquainted with.
He had to be. He held her hand. He could have just thought she was afraid, but even that's sexist.
He was trying to reassure her.
She's a woman, powerful. She doesn't need to be reassured. You guys are in the air. I'm not. She's a powerful woman that doesn't need a man to hold her hand.
I think you're right. I think he would have held Kelso's hand if Kelso hadn't been busy. I think you're right. I don't think
he was actually reaching back for Kirk's hand,
and she was just there,
happened to be there.
And when
she didn't yank away.
And as a young crewman, when a lieutenant reaches out, you take his hand. You don't know what's going on.
But she was supporting him.
Yeah.
He might have been afraid.
He was afraid.
He was afraid.
One-handedly guiding the ship while holding her.
Clearly he was terrified as he sat there grinning, navigating one-handed, and just, being the coolest guy on the bridge.
Kelso is, though. Kelso's the coolest cat on the bridge. Mitchell.
See, I like Kelso too. I was sorry to see Kelso go.
Oh, you're jumping ahead there, Admiral.
And in sick bay,
it's my turn. It's my turn. I'm jumping in.
Go ahead, please.
I'm pulling command.
Phaser me. Will you phaser me?
Yeah, phaser him. You can't even
get it out.
I'm in command here. You guys are going off in the far-flung universe every other time. So I'm going today.
Pray to me.
Time to pray, Captain.
Yes.
You think you're in command.
So, and episode 6 is off the rails already, but that's okay. So they're going to attempt the barrier, and everyone's in position. Kirk calls for an alert. Spock's giving his readings, and as we've already forestated, the barrier does not appear on sensors, yet they can physically see it, and the physical aspects of the ship, the deflector screens, are registering its presence in terms of it being an obstacle. And as they advance on it, they try to cross the barrier, and just like the Valiant, they take a beating and are forced to turn back, and the ship is probably as badly damaged as I can ever recall it being damaged in the series.
Yeah, the warp engines are now out.
The warp engines are fried.
And Kirk makes a statement that it will take them years
to get back. And crew members have died. There have been fatalities.
Yeah.
So,
I think Kirk was very confident that this wasn't going to be a problem, and I think it was based on what the Valiant had to work with. Just impulse engines and that warp and probably everything that came along in the past 200 years. I think he just thought it was going to be,
Yeah, you figure.
Yeah, it's going to, maybe a few bumps, but, nothing like what they got.
What they suffered,
yeah. They got a ship that's 200 years more advanced.
Right.
It's a reasonable expectation.
You got a Constellation class?
Constitution
class starship. It's the best of the best.
It's top of the line.
There's a scene where they're taking damage that one of the control panels looks like somebody poured the lighter fluid.
Lighter fluid on it just burst into flames.
There was just flames. There was like liquid flames over the top of the control panel.
Yes. And that was the panel that connected to the. Again, this is the pilot. It's not the engineering station on the bridge we're used to, but maybe it was the engineering station in this episode.
Right.
Because even the look and feel of the bridge is different.
So when they're in the barrier, all of a sudden you see this electrical charge, negative photo sort of effect on Dr. Lizzie.
Dr. Daner, Beth Daner.
Yep. And she gets hit first, and then I think
and faints, and then Gary catches it.
Yeah. And she's up first, and Gary's still down.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And coming out of the barrier and assessing the damage, one thing they did in this pilot episode that they toned down later. It's really Navy. I mean, Spock in particular. Spock screaming orders, and somebody repeats an order to him, just like you would on a Navy ship. The background chatter as they're assessing damage. It has a more militaristic feel than they go for later on.
Right.
But it's kind of cool because, again, delivering of the narrative, that background chatter gives you some sense of how severe the damage is and what's occurred, and you get some of the fatalities that way. It's again, it's good writing because you're given some information without it being delivered in a contrived way.
Right.
I don't think fatalities were given at that point. They were talking about the decks that were damaged.
Yes.
I think later in the episode, after the first phase, we got fatality.
Fatality number. Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody remember what that number was? I missed it.
I don't remember.
I'm looking for it now. But
I know when Dr. Lizzie came up, her eyes were fine. But when Gary rolled over, he had the
glass eyes.
He had the aluminum foil.
The blue eye.
He had the cellophane eyes.
Yes.
So it's like from the very beginning, he felt the effects the most and demonstrated the side effects the quickest.
Right. And as they go through, after the fact, as they go through their personnel records, you find out those are the two highest ESP ratings on the ship, and Spock gives further information about.
Oh, they do it. 9 dead.
Yeah.
And then all 9 of those had ESP ratings, but not, I would assume, not as high as Dr. Lizzie and Gary. So they couldn't handle the circuitry and it just killed them.
Right. High enough to be affected, but not high enough to survive.
Right.
That's what they kind of get to later.
A very Darwinistic sort of barrier our galaxy has.
Yes. You can't cross the barrier if you're weak, apparently.
That's right.
Well, regular humans can. If the ship could take it, the regular humans would have been fine. It's just the evolutionary bump for those who already have.
Do you think it's that the barrier is causing those ESP people to evolve so that they could survive through the barrier?
That's an interesting thought.
Like someone put the barrier there.
If you make it this far, greater you will be after the barrier.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of what was always implied, but they never really explain it.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was thinking.
Because if you can control matter and energy, you would. It seems like you could then control the effects of the barrier.
Let's go down that rabbit hole, shall we? I'm late for a very important day. But when you look at it and you see what's transpired in the story, like I say, we don't have the ability to talk to the writer and find out what he thought, or the group of writers, because this is not one person. But the going through the barrier,
or attempting to go through the barrier, does something to those who have ESP of certain levels. And if you don't have it, you're perfectly fine if you can get through the barrier. Then it's just what your technology can do.
Right. But if you get through the barrier, it's a sea change. Something is done to you. And the problem becomes a problem in the story.
Absolutely.
What is done to my friend Mitchell as they deal with the after effects of trying to get through the galactic barrier.
Yes.
So once Mitchell's eyes are revealed, I love that reveal when they roll him over.
Yeah.
And he looks up and his eyes are luminescent.
And we tease about that eye effect, but it actually ends up being quite effective in the episode, especially later. It's a good effect. I mean, it's minimal, but the way they use it, it's pretty effective in carrying the story forward.
Well, in that last scene, they fade to black, and the only thing's left showing is his eyes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For those guys, like something's happened here.
End of Act 1.
We don't know. I love how it's written that we learn as they learn.
Yes.
It's nobody spoon feeding you this information. Kirk does a little about the beacon for those who are not knowledgeable about ships,
right,
or starships.
Yeah, a good story written with good dialogue needs minimal exposition because you show the story.
Right.
I'm watching it. I'm not reading a book.
Right.
And you're more, and as we've touched on before, you're more invested because you haven't been told something, and now you're just watching the other people find out.
And I'm upset that my eyes didn't turn.
you want? See?
I'm upset.
See? I told you.
I'm upset.
I told you, Arthur. I told you. See?
I remember being a kid and watching that, and that eye effect was very profound.
It's striking.
Because it changes. Up until that time, you look at Gary, and he actually looks kind of fitter, taller, arguably
handsome.
Maybe more handsome.
Tall, dark, and
than
handsome.
Kirk, yeah.
He should have been captain.
Yeah. He seems like he should be.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he gets these eyes and it starts to he just
it immediately makes him different. It makes him creepy.
Yeah.
Why creepy?
He's different.
Are you saying that people who are different are creepy?
He totally did that on purpose.
Yes, I did.
I'm saying people who develop luminescent eyes when they previously didn't have them are creepy.
It's outside of the human norm.
Yeah, creepy.
Well, it's definitely it's an indication that something
Has
probably
changed.
permanent
Abnormal
has changed.
has happened.
Has changed.
Something
changed.
abnormal has happened.
Yeah.
And as a human species, crush that which is not normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. A fear reaction.
Yep.
So we
Don't touch no buttons. Go ahead, Admiral.
thank you, Captain. I appreciate it. So we come back into Act 2. There's a little more explanation of the amount of, you get a better explanation of the amount of damage the Enterprise has sustained, and it's pretty staggering. The warp engines are effectively destroyed. And we find the doctor has Dr. Now you got me calling her Beth. Dr. Daner has recovered. Lizzie Daner has recovered, and she seems to be fine. But Gary's down in sick bay. Institution Green sick bay.
Right, with the Amok time wardrobe.
Yes.
Well, before we get to the sick bay with Mitchell, at the second scene, after they did the reveal on Gary, Dr. Dana comes in.
Daner, yeah.
And she gives her report from the autopsy of the other people who died.
Yeah, the other 9 crew members.
And she says that a certain portion of their brain is burnt out.
Yes.
And she doesn't know why, but Spock, who has already looked up their personnel records,
Right.
tells her they all had an SP rating and they're higher than human norm.
Right. They were all sensitive.
And they did not burn out. She seems to be okay, but
Gary's eyes are luminescent.
I get from Spock, even from that point on, that if he could open an airlock,
he would jettison them both.
He's convinced. He's convinced that Gary Mitchell is going to kill him.
Yes.
He never talks about the ship or anything. And, Spock starts to arm himself exponentially. He almost looks like Rambo. Like you said, all he's missing was the headband at some point. Spock's like, I'm not dying like the rest of you.
Spock makes that leap of logic. He's looked at the Valiant's records. ESP is the key issue, and it's still playing out a bit at this point, but Spock very quickly comes to the conclusion, this is the same thing that happened before. That went bad. I'm not doing that. I'm not letting that happen.
Well, when Dr. Dana comes in and her autopsy shows that a certain portion of the brain has been burnt out, that's why these people died.
Right.
And her and Mitchell, because it was stated in the first part of the episode that her and Mitchell have she has a high rating. And
Yes.
they later find out that Mitchell
Has a higher rating. As they bring up the microfiche personnel records.
She postulates that she doesn't know what the cause is, and Spock automatically chimes in, it is because of this. And then on the Valiant, there was a fierce exploration of espers by somebody.
Right. Desperate for information.
And then there were commands and counter commands given on the Valiant.
Right.
Before the captain finally decided to pull the plug.
Yes.
So I'm looking at this, and Spock is looking at Dana's ratings and Mitchell's ratings, their Esper files.
Right.
And then she comes in with the information, and then Spock sort of just turns on her. He's not cool and collected.
Spock's a bit emotional in this episode.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna kill him, and if you start having shiny eyes, I'm gonna kill you too.
Yeah.
I'm taking you out.
It's just logical. Why'd you kill him? It's logical.
Spock's not open-minded. But, and then you make your way down to sick bay, and kind of getting into what we're talking about right along with Spock. I think a lot of other stories would have tried to drag this out a bit, and in this first scene in sick bay, it's made pretty clear. It's made pretty clear to the viewer that you got a problem.
Yeah.
Well, the conversation with Spock and Dana on the bridge, and he brings up regular Esper powers.
Right.
And she goes, what you're talking about is not seen with regular Esper powers.
Has not been seen.
And Kirk goes, what are regular Esper powers? And then it goes into the expanded, what possibly can be expanded. And it bears out when we, as you said, Admiral, when we go to sickbay and Mitchell is just sitting there staring at at the wall technically with his eyes glowing.
Yeah. I remember when I remember looking at that episode and initially thinking that maybe he was blind. Just the way the actor was positioned and how he was looking, and again the effectiveness of that eye effect. You can't tell what he's looking at. He's not looking at anything, and the way he was kind of laying, looking off to the side, it almost was like, has he lost his sight? And the first clue you get that things are going off the rails is Kirk walks in, and he hasn't looked at Kirk, but he knows it's Kirk, and that's somewhat subtle, but it's already there. It's already, Gary has changed.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Paul Atreides in Dune. When the spice melange has affected him, he's on the planet, and he starts to respond to people and things.
The sleeper awakens.
Right, the sleeper awakens. And this is what you have with Mitchell. Mitchell makes a statement. It's like being blind all your life and finally being able to see. Yeah. The things that are not apparent to the average person now are apparent to him. Your emotional state is visible to him.
That's a little bit later, but
well, it comes up right here when Kirk walks in, and the first thing he says, "Hello, Jim," without even looking at him,
right?
And then they begin to talk, and this is where part of the personality traits of Mitchell start to come up.
And you get some backstory on Kirk that may not have survived when they moved forward with the episodes, but
might have fell on the chopping room floor. Could have,
because what you alluded to earlier was Gary confesses. He says, I'm reading some of those long hair books that you like to read, and he teases Kirk about how studious he was back at the academy, but he's talking about Kirk as a young lieutenant instructor.
Right.
And he confesses that he pointed a certain young lady at Kirk to keep the teacher distracted, so to speak.
Well, from the way it reads, or from the way it's given, he outlined her entire campaign. So this is something the young lady wanted.
Yeah, and he helped her go after Kirk.
And as Cyrano de Bergerac,
yeah,
Mitchell tries to help her land her a young Kirk.
And it almost worked. Kirk looks at him and says, "I almost married that girl."
Mm-hmm.
But Mitchell puts it out there as, I needed something to distract you because your class was difficult. I didn't want a difficult class. I wanted the easy slide through the academy. But they said the or Lieutenant Kirk would make you work. And Mitchell wanted to slide through.
It almost seems like at this point, Mitchell is experiencing like a state of euphoria. Like he understands things. He has some clarity. He's probably perceiving the world a little bit differently. He talks about his relationship with Jim Kirk and reveals to him something that he probably could have revealed, over drinks years ago, but does it in a way that Kirk isn't off put by it, but actually kind of, like, I almost married her. And you see Gary Mitchell kind of smiling. Like he's, at this point, I don't think he's made this conversion to some sort of, God-like super ego or whatever. I think he's like, I went through something and I feel really good, and you look worried, and don't worry. I can remember everything that I need to, and I'm learning now, and everything's good.
Yeah, and he's also trying to assure Kirk that he's fit for duty and he wants to return to his station.
Right.
And yeah, what's great about this scene to me is that at this point, even though you've already been given cause to be concerned, maybe even a little fearful, Gary is kind of the victim here still. There's this thing happening to him that he has no control over, and he doesn't know quite what to make of it.
How many guys in Hollywood stories or fiction start out as a victim but become the villain?
Tons of them.
It's a very common trope.
Common trope.
Very common trope.
But
there's a statement Mitchell makes twice in this particular episode when he's talking to Kirk, and then it's revealed that the young blonde was set up by Mitchell. Mitchell says, "You better be good to me."
Yeah.
You better be good to me. And the first time it's innocuous.
It's a joke.
It's just, you're my buddy. Take care of me. I got hurt on duty for you.
Yeah, it's totally a joke.
But by the end of the conversation, they do it with the echo, like
The booming voice.
right, like it's probably something Kirk also heard in his mind as well as physically heard.
No, I don't think that was in Kirk's mind. I think Gary opened his mouth and the booming godlike voice came out. Because Kirk's turning to leave, and Gary says it, and Kirk whirls around like, whoa. And even Gary's got this look on his face like, did that just come out of me?
Right.
That he didn't know he was going to do it, but it was a
It's almost like he's fighting with his inner monologue
yeah.
of what he's thinking, and then he starts to say it because he says, you better be good to me, and then he says, I'm getting even more ideas now.
Right, I'm getting even bigger ideas.
I'm getting even bigger ideas now. And that's something you probably wouldn't say to your captain, even if he's your friend.
Yeah.
Because it could be taken in a certain way. And that is, I manipulated you back then,
and I
now
really manipulate
and now
you
I'm figuring out how to take this
Yeah.
ship from you.
But I'm getting better ideas now is not at the second you better be good to me, it's at the first.
Right.
So
Right,
it's
right.
it's meant as a joke.
Yes,
But,
initially.
but when Kirk goes to leave and Mitchell says, you better be good to me, then the boom kicks in. And then Kirk's, all the smile that was on Kirk's face, the jovialness of
Goes
this is my
away.
best buddy, goes away. And Kirk leaves the
Sick bay.
sick bay with a somber look on his face. Like,
Well,
and-
what triggers that is Gary says, when do I go back to duty? And he says, I'm going to have Dr. Lizzie observe you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like,
You can do better than that.
you can do better than that, friend captain.
Out of
In other words,
out of the 100 women on this ship,
right. You could you could get somebody who's going to look after me better. And then Kirk is like, consider it a challenge. And then that's where Gary goes, not very friendly.
You're getting close to the
It's
button.
not very friendly.
Yeah, you're getting close to the button.
We're
Why?
just
no.
reiterating what was in the film.
Hey,
Thank you,
It's
audio
not a-
author. We're just talking about
it's not
what was
our,
in Star Trek.
it's not our fault. It was 1966.
There we
you
go.
got to live with it.
There we go.
We said there's a tyranny to that age.
There is.
You have to
There
address
is.
it.
There is.
If you're talking about Napoleon, there's pikes. There's
There
not
are.
only there's not cavalry, and there's not just muskets. There's still pikes. There's still pointed sticks
And
that
swords.
people, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And yeah, even Gary's delivery of the hey, you can do better than that, friend captain, is a little bit like, ooh, Gary's not really happy with that.
He's placing an order, and he would like it fulfilled.
You can send somebody better looking and more not a walking
Well,
freezer unit.
Somebody nicer, I think, is the issue. I don't think he finds her unappealing.
And that's where Dr. Grandpa comes in and says, I could usually find something wrong with somebody, but there's nothing wrong with you. And he walks out.
Yeah, the physical.
Yeah.
Gary's in perfect health. All his numbers are fantastic.
Right.
And then the freezer unit walks in.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Dana. And she makes the statement of professional women tend
But
to be.
Let's not forget, as Kirk departs the sick bay, he calls for a 24-hour guard.
Yes,
Does
he
he?
does.
Does he?
Yes, he does.
I don't remember that. Okay.
And he catches. So again, other things might have dragged this out, but they present the evidence fairly quickly. Gary is advancing rapidly, and Kirk's aware of, and Kirk's accepting it. He's not letting Gary be a blind spot for him, at least not to a degree where it's debilitating.
He's not trying to. But when Kirk leaves the sick bay, he doesn't readily call for the guards. He goes back to the bridge, and Spock
That's when Spock goes
is
at
monitoring Mitchell's reading.
Yes,
And Spock makes a statement, he's reading even faster now.
yes,
Is this the Mitchell you know?
yeah.
I mean,
Spock's on team kill Gary.
it's
Oh, isn't he? And he's flipping through the pages. Doesn't he look at them? Well,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, he
at
does.
the
Yes, he
monitor.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, at that point, Kirk says, put a 24-hour watch on him.
Right.
And then they switch the viewer to looking at Gary, and he's looking right back at them.
Yeah.
And it gets really eerie at
Yeah.
this point.
And again, that eye effect is really good about making him
Man.
making him inhuman.
I'm watching it now, and the monitor changes, and Kirk's looking at Gary, and
Gary
Gary does a
looks-
slow turn
And looks right at
and
Kirk.
looks right at Kirk through the monitor. I'm like, I don't know. I
Great,
don't know.
great acting. Great acting
Good acting.
from that actor, because without your eyes, it's really sort of a handicap.
Mm-hmm.
But he even changed the way that he sort of the head turns become very, very purposeful.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's
Almost like it takes an effort for him to do these things now.
that's what really delivers it. You go from kind of smooth, happy-go-lucky Gary Mitchell to
almost villainous.
this guy's changing. His movements change. His demeanor is changing. His body language is changing.
Yeah,
And
that's eerie.
It's very effective.
I'll give it to you. That's
It's very
creepy.
It's very effective. See, I stand on creepy, but again, it is a credit to the actor because he can't deliver emotion with his eyes, but he's working those prosthetics to give you this very off-putting performance that's really getting you. It's moving you to Team Spock really fast. He's like, yeah, we got to kill. We got to kill Gary Mitchell.
It's almost like when he delivers his looks, it's that you understand that there may be some sort of impairment to those eyes. You're not sure. Like you said, I think Admiral.
Yeah,
I think you said you thought at first he was going to be blind in sick bay, but you see this. You see the way that he looks is almost that he's straining to hear, to listen what you're thinking. Like he's not quite there yet. So he looks at you and then he kind of cocks his head that little bit, like, he's trying to hear what it is that you're thinking. And he doesn't quite have it yet.
And he's wrapping his head around the fact that he can hear you.
Right. Because this happens very quickly.
Yes, so fast.
This has been done before, or not done before, but done also in other science fiction. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to know what the other person is thinking? It can turn bad because a lot of stray thoughts go through our head. And if you act upon what the person is thinking other than what the person actually does, it can turn bad.
Yes.
We think we want to know what other people are thinking, but truly you don't want to know what's going on in the head of someone else.
That's I always use that, the Galadriel, the mirror of Galadriel, when Frodo's with her. And then Sam looks in the mirror and he goes, I got to go back home. Like they've thrown the old gaffer out on the street and they've torn up Bagshot Row, right? And she's like, hold on a second. Some things that you see in the mirror don't happen unless those who see it stray from their path in order to prevent it. And that's exactly the issue. If you can read someone's mind and what they're thinking, it doesn't mean, like you said, Mark, that they've acted. But then do your actions that you take once you know that make that person act in the way that they were thinking?
See, that's something that humans...
It changes how you respond.
That's something that humans will never know, but it gets to the self-fulfilling prophecy. You responded to them according to what they're thinking that they never would have done.
Or said.
But since you responded to them, you drive them to do the thing that is negative that you perceived in their mind that they never would have acted upon.
Or at the very least, your response is going to be based on the thought and not on what they would have actually done or said.
So later on in the episode, we see this. But after Kirk views Mitchell on the bridge and Mitchell views him, then we switch back to the sick bay, and the doctor is checking the little markers on the. I love that bed.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we had one today.
Yeah, I've always voted for the Star Trek vital signs to be in hospital rooms. I want the pulse beat and the dials going up and down.
Well, they got it on a little machine, but it should be on the wall.
That's not the same thing. I want the dials and the pulse beat.
But once again, that's a beautiful thing about Star Trek, that even in hospital rooms, we now have devices that monitor vital signs.
It inspired the technology.
It inspired so much. You wouldn't have cell phones without Star Trek, personally thinking.
And tablets.
Yep, tablets, tricorders.
Smartphones or tricorder.
Star Trek is such a cultural phenomena.
But I'm offended that it's 2020 and I can't get my hands on a phaser. But anyway.
Let's leave that alone. But the doctor checks the readings and he makes a statement that you said he makes that Mitchell's readings are perfect.
Yeah.
Even the healthiest person has something off in their vitals. Mm-hmm. But Mitchell's is perfect. And then we later on find out why. But as the doctor leaves, Dr. Daner
Lizzie
Daner
appears. And a conversation between her and Mitchell start again,
right?
Wherein he immediately apologizes for the off comment of
Well, yeah, after she
walking
calls
freezer.
him
So
out on it.
he's not a total pig. He at least apologizes.
No, he's a pretty nice guy for 1966. But yeah, and the byplay here, I mean, outside of the obvious, well, actually backing up a step, her reaction to him, at first you just think she just likes him. You know, you're taking it as the romantic angle, but you begin to realize there's something more there in their connection, and that payoff is coming.
Right.
But she begins to vehemently defend him. And what's great about this scene between them as they're talking, outside of their flirting with each other, he's kind of expressing what he's feeling about what's happening to him. And again, going back to, he's a captain caliber guy. He's not afraid. There's a sense of wonder, and he's like, this is amazing, and it's happening so fast, and I really don't quite know what to make of it. And it amplifies his kind of the victim side of it, that this is a good guy, but bad things are happening to him.
Yes.
But it's also terrifying because he's like, power. Yeah.
Well,
this is kind of cool.
When they start their conversation, he apologizes, and she makes the statement, as I said before, that professional women overcompensate.
Yeah, she said it.
She said it. I didn't say it.
We didn't say it.
We didn't
She
say
said
it. She said it in the episode. And then he begins to go through the wonder of this new ability he has.
Well, she asks him straight out. She says, you know, well, besides all that, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Right.
And he goes, you know, I feel great. He goes, everybody seems worried about me, like I should have a fever or something. And he looks over his shoulder at the monitors, and he decides to just start messing. Now, the question is he messing with a monitor, or is he messing with his own body? His own body.
His own body for sure.
You think so?
Yeah,
really?
because when he does it, when he goes to die, the second time he does it, the first time the monitors move,
just dip a little bit.
Says maybe if I could just change these dials. So it's hard to say. You could be right in the first point, Jim, that he first was just altering the monitors, because he says maybe if I could just change these dials, and the dials go crazy. The second time he starts to think about it. He goes, watch this.
Well, hold on one sec before you jump to the second one, which is really startling. Again, this how he's experiencing this. There's a sense of wonder. He tells her, I don't know why I can do this. I just can. If I think about it, I can do it. And he's not afraid, and he's kind of intrigued by it. And, you know, he thinks it's kind of cool, but he doesn't really grasp the gravity of it. And then, Mark, and then
he says, watch this. And he just passes out. In essence, he dies. All the monitors,
he flatlines.
All the things go to zero, and he's just laying there. And then she starts to freak out. She's looking at the monitors. She's looking at him. She starts to shake him and try to revive him. And
he just
you're thinking that, that he's dead, and he comes out of it on his own. And all his readings were zero. He technically killed himself, and in essence resurrected himself.
Yes.
And she confirms that because she listens to his heart.
Yes.
She actually dips down and listens to her heart. So she would have said, you made the monitor show that you were dead. But she listens to his heart, and then she said you were dead for 22 seconds.
22 seconds.
22 seconds.
And as Admiral is saying, that he's just wrapped in the euphoria of this, wow.
Yeah, look what I can do.
Technically kill myself and bring myself back. Yeah. If you had there's a movie, I'm trying to think of the name of it, where these children find a spaceship and then they gain power out of it. Can anybody remember that movie? It's filmed almost like a remote camera. It's almost done
wow, I remember this.
It's almost done like if it was filmed.
Yeah,
first person.
Camcorder. Yeah. But it's about three friends. There was actually one guy and his cousin, and another guy who become friends because of the power. But as they start to go, one of them starts to Jones too much.
Yeah, I can't think of the name. Somebody put in the comments the name of this movie. It totally escapes me right now.
It's a very good movie,
yeah.
but it deals with the psychological issues that go along with.
Because doesn't one of them time travel at some point?
No.
Or am I mixing up with something else? But I know which movie you're talking about, but I can't call the name of it. Somebody put it in the comments. I can't think of it.
But he's jonesing on it, and
she tests him. He says, I've gone through the library in half a day, Ship's library. And she goes, do you remember everything? He goes,
yeah.
He's like, yeah. You know, the way he says it, he's like, I think what he did in that half second, he remembered everything.
Yeah, he's like, I do remember.
Yeah, I can tap into that. Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
And she goes, what about this? Volume whatever, so-and-so, such and such. And he's like.
Before that, Kelso comes in.
No, he comes in after.
No, he comes in after. Because he's getting ready to romance.
No, Kelso comes in right after he resurrects, I think.
No. He reads the goofy. She has him go and do the poem.
All right, I missed it.
And he's like, "That's one of the most romantic poems since 1996."
Yeah, it was.
What are you saying to me? What are you saying to me, Lizzie?
Yeah, why did you pull that one up?
Yeah,
out of all these things I've been reading.
Yeah, we're supposed to be on Copernicus's planet in 1996, and we didn't get there.
That's right.
we did not get there.
Well, it is a Star Trek episode.
It is.
It's fantasy, all in all. Too bad we didn't get there, though.
Well, not yet.
I feel like Avery Brooks. I'm still waiting on my flying cars.
But Mitchell is remembering, and he's going back, and he's thinking about the poem, and then he makes a comment. Why did you choose that?
Right.
Because every action we had, it stems from our thoughts.
Right.
Everything we done. She pulled that poem up for a reason. Whether that reason was she was feeling something for Mitchell or she was hoping someone felt that way about her, she pulls it up.
Probably both.
And then Mitchell uses that because he grabs her by the arm.
Says, "How are you feeling?"
And
doctor?
pulls her close, which would be, we won't even get into what it would be nowadays. But in the episode, he pulls her close, and
it's an embrace.
He begins to talk to her in such a way, implying a deeper connection.
Pulls out that line from Friends, "How you doing?"
Well, Mitchell is the playboy. So then Kelso comes in and he interrupts. And Kelso's a buzzkill.
Awkward.
And the doctor puts back on her facade, and Mitchell turns to greet Lee. And he's letting him know that don't worry about the eyes, guy. I'm still the same guy. We're still cool. We're still buddies.
But immediately proves that's not true by telling him something. He says, but those power packs have gone bad, and if you try to fire up the impulse drive, you'll blow the whole system.
Right, and Lee he's taken aback by it.
He's like, "What are you talking about? I just looked at him."
It's the way Mitchell delivers it. He no longer is delivering it to a friend.
No.
Hey, Lee, you missed something.
He's talking down to him.
He's talking down to him because later on he calls Lee a fool. He's seen them, but he didn't recognize what he saw. Yeah. And you know what my mind did in that particular episode? It went back to Finney. A simple mistake.
Yes.
He saw it, but he didn't recognize what he saw, which would cause the whole impulse stack to blow.
Which in this case is extremely bad because you don't have warp power.
It's extremely bad. It doesn't have warp power. But my mind wasn't on that. My mind was on this is a career-ending mistake. Ending mistake.
You mean if my guy Kelso hadn't gotten killed, he'd be in trouble anyway?
He'd be in trouble anyway.
Oh, that's a shame.
If Mitchell didn't make mention of this, and Kelso, I don't know if anybody would have known Kelso looked at them. They probably would have looked over the records and found that Kelso looked at them and he didn't recognize it.
Those maintenance logs are career killers.
Well, Kelso's not around long enough to get promoted, so
or demoted.
But it's the way.
Or maybe he does. Maybe that's why Kirk picks him to do what he does. maybe Kirk's like, Kelso's like, why am I the guy that's got to blow up the entire valley? Well, you missed those burnt out impulse points, didn't you?
You're done anyway.
You're done anyways. You might as well end your career down here hitting the.
You have failed me for the last time, Lieutenant.
For the last time.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a deviant right here to the look at another episode.
You're notifying us you're changing course?
I'm notifying you that we're going into a tangent. But when you
get that damage effect ready.
No, it's not going to be one of those tangents. It's going to be a legitimate tangent. But when you look at how difficult.
Here we go.
Here we go. When you look at how difficult it is on a regular starship, can you imagine how bad it is in the Mirror universe?
Oh. Yes, Captain Dash. You're agonizing.
I was driving with my wife, and we were going somewhere, and we were joking around, and I looked at her and said, "Hand me your personal agonizer."
No, Mr. Spock, I tried. I really did.
And she looked at me. She goes, "What are you talking about?" I go, "It's a Star Trek episode, honey." I was like, "Hand me your personal agonizer."
Yes.
And then remember the ag booth?
Yes.
There's actually a full booth. It's like full duration
for
him.
Do you know? Yes. Do you know? I just realized that the agonizers do exist in the regular Star Trek universe.
Oh, really?
A Klingon uses one on Chekhov in Day of the Dove.
Oh my goodness!
Puts it right on his head and works him over with it.
Wow.
But one mistake is career ending.
Yes.
In the regular Star Trek universe.
Yes.
And in Mirror,
fairly major mistakes, but
in Mirror, it's probably a death sentence.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We're not fooling with you.
You blow out the info stack, yeah, you're done.
We're not fooling with you. You're done. Yeah. But it's the way Mitchell delivers the information. He's not delivering it as a friend.
It's authoritative.
Well,
I think he's upset because
he missed it.
He's starting to understand that the people around him are pretty primitive.
They're limited.
Yeah, we're like, why are we out here if we've got, this level of competency? We probably shouldn't be out here, or we shouldn't really have these people, on this ship because they're not competent.
Yeah, we should have all M5s.
You are great. I am great.
Yeah, we shouldn't be out here. We should have M5s because you guys are too stupid to be out here.
I think Mitchell thinks he's got the M5 beat at this point.
Well, he does, but everybody else is too stupid to be out here.
Yes, that's it. I mean, that's where he's getting to. He puts his hands behind his back and he's like, he's a fool.
Yeah.
Like, you're all fools. Like, you're out here, you're in a rowboat in the North Atlantic at night with an oar. Like, you shouldn't even be here.
And that scene, Kelso runs off to verify that and fix it. But that scene where he's talking to Dr. Daner and he calls his good buddy Kelso a fool. And he's so dismissive. That scene's terrifying.
He's not dismissive. He's upset. As Jim points out, that Kelso saw it
and didn't see it and didn't recognize.
Didn't recognize. Whatever, how we do. How many times you drove past somebody and then when you see him later, oh yeah, I was on such and such road and I waved at you.
Yeah, I didn't see.
And you didn't. You said they said you look right at me.
Well, I didn't see you.
But you didn't see him.
Yeah.
So Kelso goes and he's doing his checks. He looks at the points, but he doesn't see him.
Right.
So Mitchell is upset. Look, dude, you're looking at it. And as you said, we're out here. We're in deep space, and most of you people shouldn't be here. Probably none of us, other than me now.
Right.
And when you think about when you get to a certain level and you look back at where you were,
you
call yourself a fool. Oh, when I did that, I was
right.
I was the biggest dummy on the world. I can remember personally coming to that realization of something I told somebody previously, that what I thought of myself. And then 30 years later, I look back at that situation and said, that was the dumbest statement I've ever made. At the time, you thought you were capable.
Write this down. Daystrom was not always great.
You are great. I am great.
But it's
but not anymore.
Now phaser yourself on that one, because that second one was unnecessary.
Now we need another lieutenant. But
that's all right. We got copies in the transporter ready to beam in another one.
But he even says, he goes, I'm not joking, Lee.
yeah,
He says that. He goes, I'm not joking, Lee.
yeah,
Like, I'm not joking with you. This is what's happening. And then you see Kelso's kind of like, okay. You know, he's like, huh? And he's walking away. And then it's later when he goes into the briefing room and Kelso's saying like, yeah, this is burnt out exactly like he said it was.
Yes. But to me, what makes that scene so scary is you're getting into what I think it becomes the overriding theme of the episode later on. Just in a short period of time, he's progressed to a point where he looks at his good friend as an inferior knucklehead who's not competent, and probably maybe thought something like that about Kelso anyway. But now he's in a place where he expresses it and he just calls him a fool, and he's so dismissive of it.
But what's great about the writing is that it's not a two-dimensional reaction. No. And what I mean by that is that Kelso's starting to react differently, because if they were truly friends and he did something like that, there should have been a scene where he comes back to him and is like, hey, man, thanks. You know, you saved the ship. Right. I don't know how I missed that or something. Right. But Kelso's like, he just takes it to the captain and says, you know, Gary did this, and I don't even want to. You could tell Kelso's. That's the last time he sees Gary. He does. Yeah, that's right. He doesn't want. At that point, he's like, I'm just going to let you know. I'm not getting within 5 decks of this guy.
Kelso shows up in the briefing room with his Team Spock shirt.
Kelso,
oh yeah.
Under normal circumstances, Kelso would have ran back to Mitchell and said, "Please don't write a duty log.
Please don't finny me. Don't finny me.
Yeah. Hey. Mitchell's a lieutenant.
There's a T-shirt. Don't finny me.
Don't finny me.
Don't finny me.
Finny culture.
Don't put me in a report.
But
ruin my career.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not jokingly.
It's the same scenario that Kirk and Finney went through. If under normal circumstances, Kelso's checking the power packs and misses that, and Mitchell comes behind him on the duty roster and says, hey, Kelso missed this, and if we hadn't caught it.
But Mitchell doesn't come behind him. Mitchell sees it in Lee's mind.
Right.
He doesn't even see it. He doesn't shoot through the ship with his mental powers and sees it himself. Right. He just sees it through Lee's mind.
And this feeds back into letting you know
he's in Lee's mind.
Well, that.
And whoever's mind else is in.
Well, that, and it's scary, but Dr. Dana's reaction to it also lets you know there's something up with her, because she doesn't freak out in my mind like she should have. She doesn't.
She's a trained psychiatrist too.
But he's the ultimate peeping Tom.
Right.
Yeah.
He's seeing it in your. He's seeing what you see. Let me leave that alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want to take any more damage.
We don't want to go to red alert.
This audio, Arthur. This is so restrictive.
It's tough living.
He's doing great. You're doing great, though. We're doing great.
But he sees it in Lee's mind, and then the scene switches to them having the briefing room and
better known as Spock's going to convince everybody that you got to kill this guy. Kill him now.
How many episodes do we get where Spock's like, you got to burn this guy down? We can't take any chances.
I think you get one.
Half the ones we've covered so far.
He's not like other Vulcans who just sit there and examine something until they die.
Spock, but you know that I think Spock's on a mission, and that is he's there, and he's part of Starfleet, but I think he's kind of. And I could be really wrong, but I think he approaches it as being like an observer. In other words, he's not really going to try to change culturally the way that the humans are running the ship. He's going to point things out, but at the end of the day, he'll tell you, yeah, if that's the way that you think, then you should probably destroy that Romulan before he gets back to base.
Spock wants to live long enough to make it to our mock time.
I saw that. I saw that a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I haven't
man, that might be a two-parter for Men on Track. That might be a two-parter.
That's good.
For those of you who don't know what a mock time is, go watch the episode.
That's right. Ponfar.
Ponfar.
That's going to be a rough episode.
It's going to be rough.
We might get in trouble with YouTube for that one. So like and subscribe now before you can't find it.
So Lee comes in with the apparatus and
the power pack
and
that looks like a shock absorber
before Kirk and the rest of the officers and says that it's just like Mitchell said. Then Dr. Dana comes in and the conversation starts about the greater mankind.
Yeah, the evolved people.
The evolved man.
Yeah, she's like, let him evolve. Everybody else is like, we better kill him. And then she almost gets accusatory. She says to Spock, I understand you don't have any feelings, even though you've served with this guy. But then she turns right on Kirk and she's like, this is your friend. You requested him to be on this ship, and you're in here talking about killing him. She goes right at him.
But Kirk, as Kirk is true to Kirk, what? Save my ship. The ship, as I said before in another episode, the ship is everything. There is no Star Trek without the Enterprise. You need the ship to go from point A to point B.
Well, Kirk does. Kirk needs it.
Mitchell might not necessarily need it.
No, he doesn't. He needs that ship for another day or two, and then he's probably done with it.
Yeah. Mitchell's on his way to not thinking much of starships, but not yet. And again, Dr. Dana is aggressively defending him, even in the face of mounting evidence that he's a danger to the crew and the ship.
Well, Kirk says, he says, listen, it's my job to listen to everybody in this room.
Right.
And even if that means somebody's recommending that we kill somebody so that the ship can survive, I have to listen to that.
I have to hear that.
Doesn't mean that I like it, but I'm going to do that. And then they go through this thing where Sulu talks about exponential growth. You have a penny and it doubles every day. You'll be a millionaire at the end of the month. And then Scotty talks about he was on the bridge and
systems on the ship.
Switches were flipping back and forth, and Spock says, yeah, we had Gary on the widescreen, and he was chuckling and pointing his fingers and, look what I can do.
And sidebar that, what is Spock doing while everybody's in the briefing room? He's spying on Gary Mitchell. He's watching Gary Mitchell on television.
Yeah.
So then you have the overall briefing ends, and then you have Spock and Kirk alone, and it really gets pretty heated.
Well, Spock says, with him on board, we're dead. Yeah, we're not going to make it back, and you know that. And Kirk's like, I don't need subtleties. Tell me what the solution is. Basically, I don't know how he words it, but along those lines, he's basically, what are you saying? What should we do?
Bottom line it for me,
right?
And he, Spock tells him, he's like, we can't make the mistake the Valiant made. We see what's happening. We have to kill Gary Mitchell before we can't kill him.
And in true Spock form of logic, he's going to kill two birds with one stone, pun intended. We're going to go to Delta Vega. It's a mining planet. Just happens to be in the neighborhood. We can drop Gary off into a little solitary confinement on that planet. And maybe fix the warp engines at the same time.
And get away. But Spock makes the comment that we might not have time. Right. His number one recommendation is that we kill Mitchell now.
Kill him now.
While we're able. Because at some point we'll be like little mice and we'll become a nuisance to him.
Right.
And the second recommendation, which Kirk puts forth, they're going to Delta Vega, to fix the ship so that we can have warp capacity again.
Well, Kirk argues fairly strongly against marooning Gary on an uninhabited
Well, he tells
planet.
Spock to get out of here. He tells him to leave.
Right, but that's what they're going to end up doing. But Spock makes the point. His growth might be too fast.
Right.
And there might not be anything we can do. And then we start to see the escalation in Spock. Because the very next episode, I think Spock is armed, or not episode, but the very next scene. Spock comes in armed.
Spock, when they go to visit Gary, Spock is strapped.
He's wearing that high-waisted phaser belt, and he's got it. Doc Holliday style. He's got it for that quick draw.
He's abdomen.
You could tell he could just bend his wrist and just hold it on top of that, and it's like,
and it's the
I'm your Huckleberry.
And again, it's the pilot gear. It's not the classic phaser. It's that prototype,
right?
That early prototype phaser.
But Kirk makes a statement that they're afraid that in the ship's condition, when they get to Delta Vega, they might not be able to get free of the planet's gravity. And that's the risk. They might be stranded on Delta Vega. But they need to get warp capacity again because it's going to make them years to reach an Earth base.
Yeah, they'll never make it without it.
So that's the scenario. That's the trap that you're found in. You have a enemy on board who sooner or later is going to be beyond your ability to deal with. You either kill your friend now or hope that you can strand your friend and get away. But you're still dealing with your friend.
Right.
This is a classic trope for zombie movies. You know, your sister or your mother or your father's bitten and they're about to turn. What do? The classic person waits until it's too late, and then their loved one turns on them and bites them, and then you're part of the zombie horde.
No.
Or do you have the wherewithal, Admiral Redshirt?
Oh, I'm shooting you.
When have you seen that, though? When has that happened? I don't know if I've ever seen that.
It happens.
It's like you're bit, Keith. You know, you're 12 hours away. Boom. I waste you.
In the remake of Dawn of the Dead, I think it is.
Even in that one, they wait.
Day of the Dead?
Dawn of the
Dead.
Well, there's a sequel.
It's the remake of them being trapped in the shopping mall where Zombie 2.0 becomes visible.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or becomes part of
even in that
scenario.
scene, they wait till the guy goes down. They don't do it early.
There's a lot of video games that actually do that. There's one like really popular one where a guy is protecting like a young girl and he gets bit and he has her shoot him before he turns.
There was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie about his daughter got bit or something. It was kind of a
There is, yeah.
low budget.
I think they actually do it in 28 Days Later. It's the British version of Zombie Apocalypse.
Okay.
Where a guy gets bit and the young black girl just blows him away.
In that movie, you have to because they change in seconds.
Yeah, they change it.
Oh.
You have to. It's not the same thing. You got literally like 10 seconds
So
after they
this
get
this is a scenario that the Enterprise is facing. They have someone on board who's turning before their eyes, and it's the deep position that Dana is pushing. This is your friend. You ought not be thinking of doing away with him. And the other side is if we let him do his transformation, he might come out as a praying mantis and we're all dead.
But even with her as it goes on, when I looked back at it this time, I realized to me it wasn't simply her being compassionate. It was what was going on with her that they hadn't shown you yet.
But on the surface, when you start to dig deep, and this is what I love about Star Trek, when you start to dig deep into the themes that are in Trek, you see these various levels, and you start to think about it. What does it mean to be a human with these type of powers?
Right.
I had a conversation about what would Superman really do?
Or what could he do?
Would he really allow what's going on in the world to go on as it's going on? Will he step in and be a tyrant and take over? Or will he just go to the Arctic and live his life and let you people do what you want to do? You have a guy who's changing, who has the power to stop everything and do what he wants to do. Do you let him?
I think that was, I don't know how you guys feel about The Watchmen, but was it Dr.
Manhattan.
Dr. Manhattan. And I don't know, I had some issues with that movie, but at one point he just goes, I'm just leaving. And he goes and lives on Mars. And I always thought like Superman, you were seeing 10 or 15 years out of his life. And I think they've always, and I don't know. I know very little about Star Trek compared to most real fans. I love it at a level that makes me comfortable. And I know even less about comics, just as a confession. So if I'm saying something that's common knowledge, I apologize. But I think if you saw Superman in the year 2200 or something, I don't think he would be doing anything remotely like what he's doing now.
They actually did a comic on that where Superman retired. I think it was a comic, or it might have been part of the animated series, where he retired and Batman was trying to get him back, and he was living on a farm and didn't want anything to do with anything.
Yeah, I would think that's the natural progression of that.
That is a human progression, but for comic book sales, you can't have Superman retiring.
Oh no, I get that.
So for the writers, they got to keep That's why they reboot comics every so often.
But maybe that's what's wrong. Get ready with the damage thing here. You might as well hit it because I'm going to say it. Maybe that's what's wrong with comics now. It's because you've got to keep the story going because you can't. And if you kill somebody, you bring them back or whatever. And I suppose that nobody's interested in a retired Superman. But why not? Why couldn't you write that in a way that people would want to read that?
Well, initially comics was for a medium for kids, so they didn't expect us 50-year-olds to be reading comics past a certain point. So they had to reboot the comic for a new generation.
Right.
So after a certain point, they have to start the story all over again to grab the market of the new children who are reading comics. And for those of us who live beyond that age, I'm just answering the question.
I know. I'm not criticizing.
Phaser Admiral. It's the medium. It's the medium that's being dealt with. So they had to reboot the comic for the new generation of people. And those of us who love the comic are stuck with the reboot. And it's hard for us to swallow the reboot because it's not as good. But here in the Star Trek episode, you're stuck between the choice. And you're like the captain. What do I do? This is my good friend.
Well, even he comes up with this lame sort of excuse. Well, if we get into orbit and we can't fix things, we'll be stuck into orbit. And I was waiting for Spock to go, what does it matter? Because in a couple of days, Gary's going to turn you into like a wall decoration. You're going to be a poster.
Right.
In Cafe Mitchell.
Spock is adamant that Gary Mitchell has to die. And
there's no if ands.
He's right.
He's
and the fandom at this point is probably thinking, yes, Spock is right, but Mitchell is not our friend.
Well,
we're looking at it out from a distance.
Spock says, kill Mitchell while you still can.
To your point, though, again, strength of the writing and the supposition and the delivery. You do have that empathy for Mitchell. Gary Mitchell's not a Gorn or a Klingon or anything like that. He's not a bad guy. This is happening to him. No, but this is happening to him. And you see it happening, and you do feel, they do get that across of Kirk's side of it. This is my buddy. We've been through all these things together. Gary reminds him, at one point Gary's going to remind him of a fight they were in together and how Gary got wounded. These guys are buddies. These guys are shipmates. And Kirk is faced with this incredible decision that he has to kill his close friend.
And I don't know. And, Mark has said it many times, you wish you could sit down with some of the writers. And I don't know, maybe there's an opportunity at some point to be able to do that. But you wonder what they were thinking, because I feel as though the way that this was written, that Gary is who we are supposed to be. Who, if I looked at this episode, I wouldn't think about being the captain or Spock or whatever. I would want to be Gary Mitchell.
That's why I said at the beginning, we would go through the galactic barrier. How come my eyes didn't change? You want the power. You want to be Luke Skywalker. You want to be Superman. You want to be the higher individual. But would you be a good individual? Like I said, having the ability to read somebody's mind is truly detrimental to the person with that ability if they don't have a higher sense of consciousness.
True.
So it's almost like the writers introduced the pilot as you sort of pick to be Gary Mitchell, and then this change happens to you. And then what has to happen is that you almost have to change from thinking about being Gary Mitchell to thinking about being Jim Kirk. It's almost like there's there's this evolutionary handoff that has to happen so that you have the opportunity to identify with a character who for most of us we would not be able to identify with at all.
The episode is titled "Where No Man Has Gone Before." Now, Star Trek has done a variant of this several times, Charlie X being one of them, where the human that has received godlike powers goes off the rails, and then we're looking at Mitchell's growth, and then what that breeds.
Right.
Well, that's what's interesting because, Charlie X the excuse is that he's a boy,
Right.
and Trelane as the Squire of Gothos,
He's an alien.
But he's an
still
alien
a boy.
boy. He's still a boy.
He's a child.
So it's almost like the setup is that if godlike powers come to you too soon, then you act in a certain way. But my rebuff to that would be is who has matured enough, who's old enough to receive those powers and not have them corrupt you.
Individual people, no one. You have to progress as a species.
The Organians, but they progressed as a species.
Right.
They
Right.
went from a physical form to energy.
And our buddies, the Metrons, were not there yet because they were still ready to kill people.
Oh, they enjoyed the good drive-by.
Yeah, they were still holding UFC competitions.
Hey man, when you're in Rome, you enjoy the games.
Breads and circuses.
Yeah,
Bread and
absolutely,
circuses, yeah.
absolutely. But it is that progression. It is that evolution, and that evolution has to happen. When you're talking about this sort of thing, that evolution has to happen as a species. Individuals can't handle it, and that's kind of for me becomes the driving thing of this episode. And it gets really nailed down later, but right now,
Well, the foil between Kirk and Spock in the conference room, and Kirk says, "Try to pretend you're human and feel for a moment. Do you have a heart?" And Spock retorts, "I'm sure the captain of the Valiant felt the same way." It's funny when Spock has these quick comebacks that drive everything home to the direction you ought to be going.
Spock's logic cuts through the emotions and gets to the root of the issue and does the hard thing.
I think I can remember being a kid watching this thinking in the back of my head that Spock was just going to slap Kirk out of the way. And you see him running down the corridor with a phaser and just walks into sick bay and just phasers the. It just seems like he's just like, how many different ways do I have to paint this picture for you that it is a zero-sum equation? If you don't kill this guy,
We're dead.
we're dead. Now, I'm not going out without a phaser rifle in my hands. But the rest of you moes.
There's bodies that bear hack better than my own.
Yeah, I think at this point in the episode, I'm definitely on Team Spock. I've seen enough. Where I'm like, yeah, we just need to walk in sick bay and give Gary the phaser, hit him with full power, and hope it's enough. At this point in the episode, I'm not debating it anymore. It stinks for Kirk. I get it. It's well delivered, but purely from what's been delivered in the episode at this point, yes, I'm walking sick bay, probably with more than one person, 2, 3, 4 phasers. Make it count. Melt the bed down. Do what we got to do.
I think at this point it's probably too late. I think the only thing you could probably do is lock on transporters, and by the time I don't even know then, because I think he would just probably stop the transporter from working. But I don't think you're coming down a hallway for Gary.
You're not catching him off guard.
No.
We already know he's reading people's minds.
That's why I'm coming through the door of multiple guys, because some of those casualties.
That's to even take it for granted that you can get through the door, even down the hall. Remember, he's flipping switches on the bridge.
Right.
But at this point, I'm thinking we have to try. It's time to try.
So
time
the
to
next
try.
scene switches, and they go to talk to Gary in the sick bay.
Spock is packing.
And Kirk and Dana. Well, they come up.
Dr. Dana.
Before that, they come on the planet, and then
Delta Vega.
they come up on Delta Vega,
Not to be confused with Vincent Vega.
and a
from Pulp
15. Let's see.
They come into orbit. They go into
come
orbit. Yeah.
And he calls for a landing party, Kelso, to regenerate the engines and to save the ship.
No mention of dilithium crystals.
Don't think they've come up with that yet.
He says there's some sort of processing there.
He's decided to maroon him there.
Yes.
And that I've known Mitchell for 15 years. And the landing party goes down, and then we switch back to sick bay.
Right.
And Mitchell is upset. He's still being held in sick bay. And he wants some water, and he thinks, and the cup floats to him. Mm-hmm. He drinks the water, or it slides over. And
right. And he already knows. And the thought about not being able to catch Mitchell by surprise is borne out in this scene, because when they get there and they begin to explain that they want to go down to the planet, Gary tells them, I already know what you have in mind, and I don't want to go to Delta Bay.
Well, this is where he makes...
I don't know where I want to go yet.
This is where he makes a statement. It's like being a blind man and finally
being able to see.
Everything is clear. You're not going to catch him off guard.
But
you're not going to trick him.
He's explaining to Kirk, I'm not going to let you put me off the ship just yet.
Because I still haven't figured out what I want to do.
Right. And at this point, and it's delivered as, you don't have a choice anymore. I'm calling the shots, and you should already know that. And most powerful of all, kind of like, if you didn't know you missed the boat already, Gary looks at Kirk and says, you should have done what Spock said.
Well, he shows that he's starting to read their mind, because he's saying, when I look at you, Jim, I see concern. You're worried about me. When I see Spock's ready to kill me. Spock came in with a phaser strapped to his body.
Wearing it like Doc Holliday.
And then Kirk asked the question, if you were in my place, what would you do? And Mitchell's straightforward.
I'd kill me.
I would take Spock's advice and kill me.
And that more than anything is like, yeah, you definitely missed the boat. You should have tried to kill Gary Mitchell 2 or 3 scenes ago. But then you get an instance of how powerful Gary has become, because Kirk and Spock try to.
Well, Kirk walks back to Spock and he turns, and then he starts to proceed back to Gary, and Gary doesn't let him.
Gary,
he electric shots Gary Kirk.
He gives them the Palpatine pulse.
Watching this episode, I'm wondering if Mr. Lucas was watching a little Star Trek.
Oh yeah.
Because from here on out for the rest of the episode, it's very Sithy. It's very.
Oh yeah.
From here on out for the rest of the episode,
he blasts both of them, and Dana's just sitting there, and then.
But they catch him monologuing.
They do. Mitchell starts to monologue.
Mitchell takes damage. He takes a lot of damage at that point.
Gives him.
He wants the damage button there.
I like the damage.
The hull damage?
Yeah, the hull damage.
Yeah, I gotta switch everything.
So between Kirk and Spock, they sort of put a case of whip on Mitchell. And then
no Vulcan nerve pinch on it, though.
Yeah,
just a plain old.
Not yet.
I don't think they came up with the nerve pinch.
Big old right hand. I
don't think they come up with the nerve pinch till the second season.
Yeah,
and they give him some.
They hypo him up.
Hypo.
Because Leonard Nimoy, the nerve pinch comes from the fact that Leonard Nimoy kind of reasoned that Spock wouldn't be a fisticuffs kind of guy.
Oh yeah.
That he'd have some more sophisticated way of dealing with an adversary, but.
So they drug him up. They drag him to the transporter. He starts shaking that off.
Give him enough tranquilizers supposedly to keep him down for hours, and he wakes up by the time they get him down to the transporter.
And he makes the statement, "I'll crush you like insects."
Right.
Yeah. By that point, he's
in full Palpatine mode.
His restriction now is that human body.
Yes.
I mean, I wonder where this goes. Do you think at some point he doesn't need the body anymore? I don't know.
Probably.
Okay.
Probably. Natural progression.
I would natural progression. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That he would probably move beyond the body. But moving beyond the body meaning moving beyond physical substance. He wouldn't need the planet anymore.
And as advanced as the Star Trek universe is, the remote mining facility still has a brig with a force field.
And it's automated.
That's right.
Yeah, it's fully set up for people to be there, even though nobody's there, and
Including a break.
and it's got a jail.
That's right.
In case
Well,
of
in the future, you still have criminals.
in case of Gary Mitchell break glass. But-
You have small time criminals where you put them in the brig, and
Drunk.
capital offense we know, but in Star Trek means
Death.
death.
Drunken chief engineers
They
spend the
space
night in
you.
the brig.
Do they space you or do they transport you?
They never say. They don't say
what,
how.
what do you think it would happen?
They don't say how.
What is it?
Capital punishment in Star Trek. Would they space you or would they put you in the transporter and beam you into nothing?
Neither.
Why not? Why neither?
Transporter's not going to be
It's
a method.
clean.
No.
Clean.
You know why you're not going to use a transporter to kill somebody?
Why?
Because people go on and off that thing every day.
Yeah, it's a form of capital punishment.
I'm taking the form of
do you
capital
wanna-
punishment down to the planet.
Do you want to go to work via electric chair? I don't. Do you?
That's a very good thought. I give
Nobody.
It would be.
I give you silent claps for that.
It would be a
Admiral
really
Richard.
great. I think it would be a really great weapon, though.
It would be.
Well,
If I could just be over a planet and pick somebody and just beam them into nothing.
if
What happened? I don't know.
beam them into the pattern buffer and clear the cache.
That's right. I don't know what happened.
So you beam somebody in the pattern
What
buffer.
happened to
and you
Admiral
hit-
Comac? I don't know.
So you
I know
beam-
I'm next for
The
promotion.
Tadalus field.
The Tadalus Field. Oh, it's in Mirror. It's the best.
We got to do mirror, mirror.
So
Mirror
you-
Mirror is it's my solid number 2. This is your 2, isn't it though?
Yeah,
Mark?
this is my
So
two.
you beam somebody in the transporter and you clear the
That's
catch.
what the Talus
you clear
field
the
is.
catch and the cookies.
That's what
and
the
they're just
Tadalus
gone?
Field is.
They're
That's what the
gone.
Tadalus Field is.
God.
It's a
Okay.
transporter that beams you into nothing, and there's no record.
So once again, we diverted from the
Well, yes,
episode.
but no.
That's just
but
preview of
to
coming
answer-
attractions.
To answer your question, though, I'm betting when they decide to off you and track, there's probably the ag booth. You probably step into a booth and get incinerated if somebody just doesn't break out a phaser and no evidence you.
Well, there's that one episode where they have the computers doing the war, and if
Yeah,
you're
I'm thinking it's
proclaimed as a
something like
death-
that.
There's
There's probably
incineration
an
booth.
incinerator
Yeah,
booth.
yeah, you just yeah,
Put them in the tube, hit the button,
yeah,
it's clean.
yeah.
But it does.
It's clean.
But it
It's
doesn't.
quick.
It doesn't make you feel like get on the transporter. No, I'm not getting on.
Once again, 1960,
That was an
1967.
acceptable idea.
it was an acceptable idea of capital punishment.
That some things
For
should
murder.
earn. That something should
It's
earn
a
you.
great line. It's from Chekhov in Undiscovered Country, where they go, Rura Pente. It's like, no, it was Scotty. Better to kill him now.
yeah.
Just kill him now instead of sending him to Rura Pente.
So they transport down to the planet and they get Mitchell in the brig,
Yes.
and Kirk makes a statement that I only want one officer left here,
Right. At any
To
given
monitor.
time.
and Dana chooses to stay.
Dr. Lizzie's going to stay with him.
Of course. And not because she's a nice person.
And then we kind of get the last kind of, I guess, semi-human interactions between Kirk and Mitchell. And he's like, my friend Jim Kirk. And remember I took that poison dart for you? And Kirk's like, yeah, I remember all that, but I'm still going to leave you here. And then Gary starts to push through the force field. Does it a couple times, finally knocks him back, and his eyes clear for a minute. And he looks up and he says, Jim, what's up, buddy? And then his eyes kind of cloud over again, and that's it. From that point on, he's just
Well, Mitchell tells him in that interaction that Kirk's a fool and he should have killed him now.
Right. There's a great line there. He says, "Command and compassion are a fool's mixture."
Right, because you can't
another T-shirt.
you can't
Yeah.
you can't be too soft when it comes to the potential death of the ship.
Right.
Someone makes a mistake,
Right.
they got to be put on report.
And by the way, Spock has his phaser out in his hand
yes.
during that scene. He's just ready to pull the trigger.
But it's sad when you see Mitchell go back to normal. You're like, well, maybe
Right.
we can recover. Maybe something can
Maybe
help
something
him.
could be done.
Maybe something can help him. But then his eyes go silvery again, and he's back in God mode.
In seconds. Yeah, because in another episode, they would have said, well, what kind of energy does the brig force field run on? Maybe if we hit him with enough of it,
Change the
we can
frequency.
change him or something.
We
But
can drain him back to normal.
yeah, bring him back to Earth.
But remember, a change was made in his brain.
Right, it's permanent.
it's a done deal.
Right.
Well, he says to him, he goes, I'll just keep getting stronger. You know that.
Right. I'm going to
It's only a matter of time.
I'm going to get out of here.
That's right. And when I do,
So Kelso cannibalizes the base, sends up the parts to Scotty.
Yeah.
Scotty plugs them into the Enterprise, and with a cat-eating grin, oh, the ship's on 100%. I don't know what you guys are doing down there, but we can leave right now.
that's a great line too. He's like, it fits like a glove. Oh no, by the way, did Mr. Spock get that phaser rifle he wanted and the 20 extra clips?
Kirk looks around, and here comes Spock around the corner.
With artillery.
I drained 5 phaser rifles and they kept coming.
The only time you see a phaser rifle, and considering how devastating
Really?
a regular phaser
Yeah.
is, yeah, and considering how devastating, well, in the old series, and considering how devastating a regular phaser is, you can only kind of imagine what a phaser rifle can do.
Do you think it's range? It's a longer range? It's a bigger blast? Is it both? What's the...
I'd take it to be all of the above.
Really?
I think they showed one in. No, even that was hand phasers in the cage when they tried to blast their way into the complex.
No, what happens in the cage is they actually bring down a phaser from off the ship.
They bring down a
ship
cannon.
phaser.
Yes, they do. They bring down
Phaser
a cannon.
from off the ship,
Yes,
and they try to blast their way in,
yeah. But
which shears half the mountaintop, but they don't know.
they don't know it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a phaser rifle, and it's the only time you see one in the old series, and they never really get into. I'm sure there's technical specifications on it and what it can do versus a hand phaser, but considering what a hand phaser does, this is a serious piece of hardware.
But what you see is Kirk tells Kelso to
Set the bomb.
set the installation to blow up. And they'll destroy everything in the phaser.
Well, he
in
doesn't
the
say
area.
put a delay on it so that Kelso you can get up to the ship.
Right.
He says,
Lab-
I remember
a dead
those
man
burnt.
switch.
I remember those burnt impulse
Yeah, power pack
Power pack.
pennants.
power pack pennants. So I'm gonna need you to just
Stay here
push that button.
and die with
I-
Mitchell.
If I call you on my giant Nextel communicator, you have to push the button.
Nextel.
If you don't know what Nextel is, you're
too
very young, and you need to go back and watch the entire original series and hit like and subscribe on Men on Trek.
So the phaser rifle, Spock comes around the corner. He's got the phaser rifle. He's basically, look, he tried to get through again. He
His
wasn't
eyes-
as weak.
Yeah.
It's, we'll be lucky to get out of here. Then they cut back to the brig, and I believe it's Spock and Kirk and Dr. Lizzie. And Gary's just staring at him, and she's like, he's been like that for hours.
And you see through Gary's mind, and he sees
Kelso, and he knows
and
about
the flying rope.
the flying cable murder.
the power cable.
That is like, out of my childhood watching Star Trek, that's the one scene that's like always stuck in my head when Gary takes out Kelso with the power cable. That's one of those scenes that's just like, wow, it's like, man.
That's where Gary's completely gone.
Yeah.
He's murdered his friend.
I always thought that scene, it would come up, wrap around his neck, and it would pull him to the other side of the console. And you would just assume that you would see him die.
Oh no! Oh no! They give you the whole brutal.
They give you the whole brutal. So
He's laying with his back on it. He's choked till he's dead.
Yeah.
Dead.
Another interesting thought I had when we were reviewing it. Somewhere along the way, 1960s television, I mean, we've mentioned it many times, they knock off a lot of people in Star Trek.
Oh yeah,
You see it.
This is regular television.
But it was primetime television back in the day, but it's regular TV. And somewhere along the way, they changed the rules where you really couldn't show somebody get overtly killed in television, because when you blow by to the 80s, you had shows where there's 1,000 rounds flying and nobody gets hit, or maybe somebody gets hit in the arm, but you don't see anybody die until you get back to like Magnum PI and Miami Vice is when they actually showed people getting killed. But on Star Trek, phasers, bombs, Gary Mitchell with a cable, Tholian, Gorn, 100,000 ways to die in Star Trek, and you're going to see it. Doomsday Machine, Space Amoeba, It's just
a lot of people are dying in the future.
The body count,
and it's not pretty.
The body count is horrendous, and you're seeing it now. Maybe somebody said because the way they work the phasers, you see this guy get hit and he glows for a second and he's gone, which to me is far more brutal than seeing somebody just catch a round and fall down. But this was all fair game, and then somewhere along the way they said, no, we can't do this.
Now, we are not film professionals.
Right.
Admiral Redshirt might be inaccurate in the dates given, but the thought is still the same.
Right.
Things have changed from the 1960s
and reverted back
till today in what is acceptable. I remember we had a Chinese student come visit our house, and we had a copy of RoboCop. It wasn't Chinese, it was Japanese. Had a copy of RoboCop, and the scene where the character's hand gets blown off. This young kid he almost had a fit, and I was thinking, man, your anime is so violent compared to, but it was the difference between anime
and
live action.
Yes,
because that scene in RoboCop where his hand gets blown off is
brutal.
Is brutal.
Very brutal.
But here, when Kelso gets strangled, and we know this is done for cinematics because at this point, Mitchell's power should be high enough. If I can levitate a rope or a cable up, I can just as easily put force around your heart and constrict your heart from beating.
There's any number of things he could do.
Any number of things.
Logically.
But we have to get the show. Him just grasping his heart and falling over is not as exciting.
Yeah, there's something about the way he does Kelso in that makes it worse. Because like you said, he's murdering his friend, and to strangle him to death is just, of all the ways that it could have been done.
There's a lot quicker ways.
It's harsh
to kill him.
It's harsh
than to strangle him, and he's doing it while Kirk and Spock and Lizzie is looking at him, and he's just looking off into the distance. And okay, I'm gonna take out the one guy who was left to blow up the valley,
the guy that might stop me,
and the rest of you guys and your phaser equipment, rifle, pistol, or whatever you have is insignificant.
Right.
Yeah, he's lost his last remnants of humanity.
And again, credit to the actor in those eye prosthetics. They little subtle things they do, like his hair is turning gray at the edges,
and
his chin is always up.
His chin is up. He's got that superior body language. Like, I'm not like you anymore.
Literally looking down his nose at people. He's got his head tilted in the air,
and very deliberate, measured motions, and very just, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not freewheeling Gary Mitchell anymore.
He's almost like he's becoming a predator.
Yeah.
In the way that he's starting to move now. He's very calculated now. He's there's no spontaneity or that natural sort of, coolness that we saw in the beginning in the turbo lift and on the bridge. Even the way that he's walking and moving, he's transformed.
Yeah. And almost conveying the aspect of, because of what's happened to him, he knows. He already knows. He doesn't have to be told anything. Nothing's out of his reach, or nothing can be hidden from him at this point.
Yeah, I still think that his evolution, as quick as it was, it still lagged a little bit to solve his ultimate problem, because using a cable instead of why not just think him out of existence? Yeah, I think that's capable. I think he's capable of doing it very, very soon. But there's still sort of a timetable that he's got to go through before he can get to the point and reach up in space and just destroy that ship. He
probably the limits of his imagination. He just hasn't thought about it yet.
Well,
wasn't it that thing in the Green Lantern? I don't know if you guys were a fan of the movie or not. I remember seeing it.
I hated the movie. I read the comic.
But he was in training, and the one guy was saying your imagination isn't large enough to utilize the ring in the way that you could ever beat me, because I've I can think of things quicker and larger than you ever can. So.
Yeah,
Right. Your imagination is not fluid enough.
Yeah, the rings are driven by will, and it's whatever you can think of as long as you believe in it enough.
Right.
Now, for that movie reference I made earlier, and I don't know if any of you caught it yet. I just looked it up, but it is, and you were talking about the super predator, and that's one of the things the character says in that movie, that they realize that they are so far above what humans are. They're a super predator. Humans are at the top of the food chain, and we eat just about anything we want to eat.
Right.
There's people that eat alligator, eat all kinds of the beasts that are upon the planet because we are
Top
the
of the
super
food chain.
predator. The only restriction we put on ourselves truly is eating other humans.
Well, not everywhere.
And
Well.
some people don't stop there either.
Well,
Yeah.
civilized society.
Shout out to all you cannibals who might be listening.
Civilized society. We do not eat fellow
Clarice.
humans.
Clarice.
If you're a cannibal, hit like and subscribe.
But this is the question is,
Clarice.
Mitchell is so far.
You gonna
He-
tell us the name of the movie?
No, he's not gonna tell us. He's just sitting there looking at it.
Well, the Keith put it forth for our viewers or our listeners to look it up and
This is true.
give a
This is
shout
true.
out. So
I've never seen this.
watch it. It's pretty good.
Don't
It's-
say the name.
Recent?
I want to see 200 comments
Oh,
with
it's
the name of
about
that
5
movie.
years old or more.
It's
Wow.
older than that.
2012.
Yeah, it's old.
So, Mitchell is so far beyond, but they're at the point of no return.
Oh, past.
No, well, they don't know Lee's dead. All they know is after Lee dies, he tells them that you should have killed me, and he starts to throw himself into the force field. Or is it the force field? He shocks
He shocks Kirk and Spock again,
into unconsciousness.
and he walks
And he-
through the
and
force
yeah,
field.
he wipes
it's,
the
it's
force
not an
field out.
issue for him anymore.
He wipes the force field out.
Yeah.
And then he brings Dana in to look in the mirror, and we have the reveal
Yeah.
that she is also going over to the dark side.
She's a dirty no good too.
She's a Sith. She's a Sith Lord. There must be two. The rule of
The
two.
rule of two, yes. Yeah. I'm telling you.
Always two.
I'm telling you. 10 years later. 10 years later, George put his movie out, and
You think he copied
I don't know. Lightning.
lightning out of the hands?
People have bad attitudes. There's lightning. There's the changing of the eyes.
And there's two.
There's two. I'm thinking by time the idea got fleshed out, there might have been, some influence.
Yeah, but I think those are kind of universal stories of.
We're gonna get sued
People.
by a mouse.
No, we're talking about Star Trek.
Aren't we? Yes. Okay, good.
I can't help it that there's similarities between some other franchise that
thought-
came after.
I thought I was somewhere else far, far away for a
That
minute.
came after our
Oh
beloved.
my goodness. Red alert.
Yeah. I'm the Admiral. When I say red alert, it's red alert.
Have you noticed that there's a progression with the Admiral through our own episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dana has now
Change.
been revealed that it took her longer, but she is now in that higher human state. And when the doctor comes, not McCoy, and wakes up Kirk.
Piper, I'm retiring after dealing
Did we
with
talk
Gary
about
Mitchell.
did we talk about how Gary took them both out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lightning.
Okay. And Piper shows up and puts a Tic Tac under Kirk's tongue, and he wakes up,
Yeah.
Pop, pop, fizz, fizz.
and then he goes to give a Tic Tac to
Starfleet.
Spock.
Starfleet doctors are Johnny on the spot with the stimulants.
Where's the hypo though? I already showed the hypo. What do you
They
need a
have-
pill for?
Hey, uppers, downers, stimulants. They
It's
got
all
it
in the
all.
hypo.
It's all in the black bag.
You never see a Tic Tac after this. It's not take a pill.
But nonetheless, Kirk wakes up, and I'm thinking, why go after Mitchell? Just beam up what's left
Run away.
and warp out of
Yeah.
there. Get away. She was nutty for him anyway.
That's not Star Trek-y. That's not what captains do.
Well, you could technically say that, well, I got to deal with it because another ship could come by and he could...
No. I got something for you.
Okay, explain it to me.
What he's worried about is his ship at this point. And if he beams up there and Gary's got the power to reach up there and destroy that ship, that's not what he wants. I think he's thinking the only way to make sure the ship, and he tells the doctor, he goes, listen, I don't know why he says 12 hours. 12 hours, Gary Mitchell's
could build his own star.
Yeah, he'll be moving his planet around like the Squire of Gothos by that point. I'd say 12 minutes. Give me 12 minutes after the sensors show me in front of him, and then go ahead and try to get out of here.
If he's not dead, get out of here.
Right, but he just basically says, give me 12 hours, and I think what he's trying to do is like, if I can keep him busy so the ship can get away. That's what I'm thinking he's thinking.
Yeah. What I took out of it, all jokes aside, is that they were dealing with how responsible Kirk felt for the whole thing. This is his friend. He knows what he has to do, but he wants to be the one to do it. He feels like he has to do it. I agree with Jim. There might have been an element of maybe this will buy some time for the ship, but logically, if anything, I'm beaming up to the ship and I'm going after Gary with the ship's phaser banks. I'm not going down there with a phaser rifle.
I'm not risking it. I'm
not
sorry.
going down there with a phaser rifle.
Audio Arthur, I'm jumping in the ship and I'm booking wide. I'm breaking wide, man. Yeah. I'm breaking wide. I'm not fooling with it.
I think
that's old people talk for running away.
He's a starship captain and he's willing to sacrifice himself to buy some time so his ship can get away.
I think so.
And you made a statement when we were watching it again that why not take Spock with you? Spock's a target.
Yeah. Somebody
Mitchell probably think I want this guy dead anyway.
Same reason I would have ran into sick bay with like 5 guys. Somebody can soak up some damage. Maybe I can get a shot in.
You're right. That made no sense.
Maybe I can get a shot in.
Not only give Spock a pill, but give him some Pomfar juice. Let's get him riled up, man.
Yeah, and maybe they hadn't thought of it by this episode yet, but Spock is physically stronger. It's like, jump on Gary.
I don't think they thought of it.
Jump on Gary.
I don't think that evolution of the Vulcans have taken place in Star Trek at the moment.
Plus, I don't think he wants to get another crew member killed. He's already lost 9.
But when they transfer to him and her being out there in the wilderness,
yes,
you get to see the level that he's grown to, that he can alter the terrain by thought. He can molecularly rearrange atoms to make whatever he wants to make.
And what does he say to good old Lizzie? He says, "See how unimportant they are."
Oh yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. If I can make whatever I want to make,
as he's creating.
Right. He's creating plants. He's creating fruit. He's not that far off from creating people. He can if he can do a plant, he can definitely do a ship.
Do you not see the biblical references here?
Oh yeah, Adam and Eve.
Yeah, say Adam and Eve. They're in paradise. He makes her eat an apple, and when she eats the apple, he tells her, "Go look at him.
Yeah,
go see for what he really is."
Because she's eaten of the tree of good and of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
But even before that, I mean, when a guy offs himself for 22 seconds and then rises again,
you have a Christ-like representation.
Yeah. And if any of you come back, and if any of you can willfully kill yourself and come back from the dead, you're getting the phaser. You're getting the phaser then.
Well, if you can't phaser him, he's a guy you definitely need to leave alone.
Yes.
Put that guy, like I say, transport him off the ship is humanly possible.
At that point, I'm testing your ability to reassemble your molecules. I'm coming after you with a phaser.
Well, you get a Dr. Manhattan and he reassembles himself.
Well, then there's nothing to do but to turn the phaser around and take
no. Like I said, jump in the ship and book wide, man.
Kirk has the resources he needs to defeat him at this point. Kirk just doesn't know it. So he thinks it's a phaser rifle that he's holding in his hand, and actually it's Dr. Lizzie.
Right.
Of course.
It's the psychological attack.
Right.
That works on her but didn't work on Mitchell because she's a psychologist. She knows the evils that inhabit the human mind. That's why I said being able to read minds is a bad thing.
It is. It's very
because
bad.
of the things we harbor in our minds, things that we think about but never act on. And this is the whole thing that's going on in society now. I'm just going to dip there and come up real quick. Implicit bias. that people are touting on today. We do have implicit biases, but there's things that run through our minds that we don't act on.
Right.
Right.
Just because it's there, just because you thought about it, doesn't mean you're going to act on it.
Yeah.
But when you're reading people's minds, how do you separate what they will act on from what they don't?
Well, it's the difference between self-control and self-discipline and social control and social discipline. So if I'm being censored by
Internal and external.
Facebook versus should I know that in order to make statements with people who really aren't my friends, that I might not hear what I want to hear. And it's very difficult to write stories like this anymore, because there are very strong opinions now on, what
Is acceptable and what isn't.
Right, what a character should or shouldn't do. Well, that's really up to the author. And if you don't like it, don't watch it, right? But, that's not true anymore. And I get it. If these shows were somehow dressed up today, so in other words, if you rebooted this and used the same scripts in 2020, could you watch it and just value the storytelling, or would you be lost in the minutia of the aesthetics of what the message you believe is being told? And I think that's kind of, unfortunately where we are with a lot of things. It's not so much about what the effort has been, and we say, the writers back then were better and everything. I don't want to insult any current writers. That's not really what our point is. It's probably is that the writers, for the most part now, have to cater and pander to studios that want to move a product forward.
Studios in different groups. The writers back in 1960 had less hoops to jump through than writers have today, because the boxes have to be checked
to me,
for it to be produced.
To me, it's thought-provoking writing. And we've said it before, writing that inspires you or moves you to think and consider something versus writing that tells you what to think.
Or shames you, or tells you that your view doesn't have value. Only a view in which another organization or group of people have said has value to it, and that's difficult. I mean, I would much rather be a writer in 1966 than in 2020.
So back to the episode, Mitchell sends Dana to go look at Kirk and see how insignificant he is.
Right.
And then Kirk starts his argument with her and talking about Mitchell, what a god should be.
Well, this is
and if all things a god should have compassion.
Well, yeah, to me, this is the crux of the episode. This is what it's really about. That you can't give somebody with human flaws and frailties this kind of power and have a good outcome under any circumstances.
So Dana goes, what do you know about gods? And Kirk goes, well, let's talk about men then.
Yeah.
I need you to be a psychiatrist for
a little bit longer,
for a couple of seconds longer, and look at it. Things that we would not dare to do, he will dare, because there's no ramifications to stop him.
Right.
This is playing out in society right now to a degree. People doing things and not being hindered from doing them. And they go to the next extreme.
Right.
There's no one to stop Gary from doing what he's doing. And he asked her, look at it. What do you think about it? And then Gary appears. And then the confrontation starts. And then
doesn't Kirk he gets a shot off?
Oh yeah. Point blank right in the chest. Does
nothing.
Not even a warm feeling.
And then for Gary flicks away the rifle.
Right.
And then the next thing is that the line I like, pray to me, Kirk.
Time to pray, Captain. Pray to me.
Yeah.
And his voice has a permanent echo now.
Right.
Yes.
But Kirk immediately says, to you and not both of you?
Right.
Driving that wedge.
So both of you are supposedly gods, right?
Yeah.
Mitchell is focused on himself.
All consuming.
And during the battle, Kirk is driving that wedge that pretty soon there's only going to be one of you.
Right.
Interesting. One God.
One to
Highlander. There can be only one.
Well, one to wield the power and one to crave it.
One to wield the power and everyone else worship that one.
I don't think Dr. Lizzie would have been around for long.
No. Because she wouldn't. He was moving forward so fast. If she had maintained her slow pace, as evidenced by when she finally transformed, he would have become annoyed with her at some point.
I think she has a psychological power much greater than his because of her training.
Possibly. So
And I think that
she was holding on to her.
I think she would have held on to more of it. She probably would have. Well, she was a compassionate God because she did do what Kirk was basically asking her to do, and that is, you're going to have to take him out.
Then this is a problem when you take these type of stories to their logical conclusion.
Yes.
Because he's at a point now where he can reshape matter.
Yeah. And he's a nihilistic person.
He could recreate. He could wipe her out and recreate her. He could change her thinking. He could have changed all the thinking of everybody on the ship. He's at that level that he could have made them believe anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just hadn't gotten around to
But
it.
he's done with them.
Yeah.
He didn't have to go down this road. This is part of who Mitchell is, because at the very beginning, when he's talking to Kirk about the blonde that he sent his way, Mitchell is self-serving.
Yes. It's the foundation of his personality.
It's the basics of who he is. Because he did that, who Kirk almost married the woman.
It's a
Purely for self-serving reasons.
It's a character flaw for Gary Mitchell that as a normal person he has to work on and keep in check.
As a God, he doesn't have to work on it.
But now,
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit not on that 100%. Because the way that he's first introduced, he's like, I heard Kelso's voice, so I'm heading to the bridge. I think that he's I don't think he's like a personality disorder type or something.
Oh, no.
I think he's had a lot of opportunities. He's worked hard and he does care about people, but the temptations are too great. I mean, and that's probably even, an even more, I don't know, a more support for what you all are saying, because if Gary, what was Gary Mitchell lacking really? Not much.
I'm not saying it's much. The point I'm making is when you're launching from Earth to the moon, a millimeter off down here is hundreds of miles off up there.
Right.
So although this small character defect is very small, as the power increases,
right,
it becomes wider and wider, because what he was willing to do as a human that almost got his buddy to marry a girl.
Right.
Now, obviously, the girl wanted him, but Kelso wrote her attack plan.
Mitchell.
Mitchell, thank
Kelso's
you.
dead.
Mm-hmm.
Mitchell wrote her attack plan so that she could win him.
Justice for Kelso.
But now, as the one who has all the power, and there is no ramification, there is no consequence for my actions.
Yes.
I can do whatever I want to do.
And the negative impulse is going to become the driving impulse.
Not necessarily the driving, but they're unsurmountable by other people.
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't know. I guess I still don't think that he was a self. I don't believe he's a narcissistic. I don't believe that he was just all about himself.
No.
I think that he's the first guy in line, and people wave him into the club, and the ladies come up to him, and he's just, he's had a good life. I don't see him as being some, newer versions of this, he'd be the nerdy guy that nobody paid any attention to, and then he becomes a god or something. Because Gary is kind of the closest thing that you have to that type of personality to begin with on the ship to start.
Well, not.
He's got unlimited access to the captain, who's his friend. He can not have the responsibility of day-to-day operations. He appears to have a lot of the lady friends that he wants to. He's got a sense of humor. He's got plenty of friends. He knows his job really well. This isn't a guy who's like walking around going, I wish my life was something different. So if he's tempted, if he's the one, when he gets the power that he's like, I'm going to nut out and become whatever I want to be, then everyone else on that ship probably would have been a worse version of this.
That's what happened to the Valiant. The point is, Kirk points it out, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
Why? Because humans are flawed.
Because we still have our human impulse.
No matter how good the best of us are.
Right.
If you give that person ultimate say, they become a villain of the history books.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say any names, but there's several in human society that we can look at who obtained absolute power over their country.
Right.
And guess what they've done? They're the biggest mass murderers that have ever walked the earth.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter how good Mitchell was.
Right.
And that's what I was driving at. Just, we all have impulses and thoughts that we have to keep in check. And there are things in our society that force us to do that. And when all that's gone, you're just going to run with it.
So Mitchell goes, I've been pondering that. I've been thinking about the death of an old friend. And then he digs a grave, and then he puts a headstone on there. And then
instant grave.
He starts to bring down half of the paper mache mountain. He's getting ready to bring the big rock a la Gorn style down on Kirk. And Lizzie decides it's time for her to practice her
divinity,
her Sith lightning.
Yeah.
And her and Gary have an exchange, and she beats him down to the point where Kirk can start to physically handle him again, but she burns it all on that. Right. Like she's
mortally wounded.
She mortally wounded to just bring him down to the point.
He returned fire too, so
right.
Yeah, but she's done. She shot her load.
She should have threw him down the reactor shaft, but
there's no reactor shaft.
No reactor shaft.
But it just would have been a clone.
This scene sets in my mind. Like I said, this is one of my top episodes. This
number 2 for you.
The Pray to Me Kirk, and then the creation of the tomb and the headstone. It means nothing, and the rock that's teetering on the verge of coming down. It's like the sword of Damocles. And then the hand-to-hand, you got to have a hand-to-hand battle.
The fact that
you got to rip Kirk's shirt. You got to rip his shirt.
Well, is this the first ripped shirt for Kirk?
It would be.
It would be. Yeah. Because Pike didn't get his clothes ripped, apparently.
Well, now remember, this is the second pilot, and you got to please the suits.
Right.
So there had to be some fisticuffs. So far you gave them a lot of the cerebral stuff.
A wagon train in space.
You
had to be a fist fight.
You had to give them a phaser blast, and to keep the.
But
suits
we don't
happy.
have the iconic dun, 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 dun. That's not in there.
No,
that's not in there.
Hasn't been written.
Yeah,
Yet.
it didn't feel right without it.
It didn't. It didn't.
Well, next time we watch it, we'll play that in the background.
That's right.
We need a button for that.
And we had one for the romantic love scenes as well too.
Yeah.
But Kirk and Gary go at it. Kirk's kind of getting the upper hand. He gets on top of Gary. He's got the Gorn rock in his hand, and he's like, "Gary, forgive me." And Gary's like, "Well, I'm not going to have to because my eyes are back to being shiny." So
and the scenes with Dana and Mitchell when he's talking to her about all he can create and all he can do, again, effective delivery. The eye prosthetics make them look very inhuman, and what really carries is the way both actors kind of look off screen just a little bit, where they don't seem to be looking at anything, but it's like they're seeing beyond.
Yeah, looking through you.
Looking through you.
Right.
it's really off-putting. It really makes them come off as inhuman, and Gary in particular dangerous. It's a good delivery. It's a really good delivery, and you can kind of laugh at the eye prosthetic, but it's effective. It's so perfect. It's very effective.
When you get to the pray to me scene and he pulls his hand forward, and the Sith pulling power,
yes,
and he drags Kirk to him and forces Kirk to his knees.
Just choked Kirk
and and force it, but he doesn't want to kill him. He wants to make him submit.
Right.
I'm a god. You should be praying to me.
Right.
And that's where the whole scene comes from. And then and Kirk goes, you're watching this, right? You see what he is.
You're next.
Right.
You're next.
There can only be one God. Pretty soon you're going to kill each other. And then she turns on Mitchell and provides the avenue for Kirk to get into that oh so great fisticuff scene with him and Mitchell fighting. And they're doing the back and forth, and Kirk gets the rock and Mitchell turns back, and they tussle and fall into the pit.
Yeah. I don't know. That scene where Kirk's got the rock and he's getting ready to deliver the blow, and he's like, "Forgive me, Gary." By that point, I don't know if I'm kind of over it. I don't know if I'm like sad about Gary anymore. Not right in that moment. I'm thinking I got to deliver that rock. I'm not pausing right there. But that's just me.
Well, that's good to know, Keith. Thanks, man.
Well,
he's not giving you a second chance.
Right.
I told
this zombie land rules.
I told you. I put the whole crew on notice. If your eyes change color, I'm hitting you with a phaser. I'm not waiting around to find out what happens next. Everybody whose eyes change color unexpectedly gets the phaser.
Don't worry about it, Keith. I'm not going to make the mistake. I'm going to mind wipe you very quick.
Oh, I appreciate
You're
that.
not going to get the chance to get the face.
You're not gonna let me have the thought?
No, we're not doing no fisticuffs. I'm not letting you have the thought.
Okay.
Once my eyes change, it's over.
Arthur.
Well, it's interesting. He says,
Arthur, if he starts
when
waving
Kirk
his hand
says,
around,
"Forgive me," and Gary says, "I'll forgive you for a moment, but your moment is fading."
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
that's what a great line.
It
You
is
could
good.
miss it. You could miss it.
Yeah.
I missed it. The first 10 times I saw it. so.
Mitchell delivers some good lines in this.
Yeah.
That whole superior thing is coming across very well.
So when he comes back, now you're facing a different battle.
Mm-hmm.
You're facing Batman versus Superman. You're facing a guy, no matter what you do, you can't hurt him.
Yeah.
You can't take him down. And Mitchell picks up the Gorn rock and prepares to smash Kirk into oblivion. And then Kirk sort of tackles him and they fall into the pit. And then that's
Open grave.
Yep.
Open
And
grave.
the mask, the big grave.
And then that's where he grabs the phaser rifle and shoots the sword of Damocles,
blast the rock. Yeah.
the big rock that's just waiting to topple in.
Phaser rifle won't kill him, but a rock will.
Well, the rock supposedly crushes him. You got to be able to
Right.
kill him somehow.
That's true. And they do. It's like when Kirk said it's impossible to be held from this distance, and Spock goes, "We are being held," and it's just like in this episode. It's like,
right.
can a rock really kill him?
Now,
a rock did kill him.
Now, could you take this episode and write that Mitchell did not die,
Oh, absolutely. It'd be easy.
and Mitchell would reappear somewhere else in another Star Trek episode as I Am Greater?
I almost said something, but I don't want somebody to go out and write the book, and I think I'll keep that one to myself. But yeah, I mean, logically, as Jim's pointing out, to the point where Gary had evolved, dropping a rock on him,
Yeah, shouldn't kill
is he
him.
dead? Did you trap him momentarily? Maybe. Even that's hard to swallow considering what he had become.
And unless the rock crushed his melon, even though he's physically crushed at the moment, his mind should.
Well, he
still be
wasn't
working.
prepared for the defense of it, so
Yeah.
it did catch him unexpected.
The tombstone fell on him too. He got hit.
So that would break his back, maybe.
He got hit with He got hit with Kirk's tombstone.
But this is the way they needed to end the episode. It's a problem in writing. Once you make someone so greater,
right.
it's hard to get rid of them once they get to a certain level.
They hadn't thought or written any of this yet, but
Right.
Trulane's parents probably should have showed up and took him away.
Right. Right. He's on a greater level now. But this is how they end the episode, and then we see Kirk flipping up the bag phone communicator.
The Nextel.
The Nextel.
The Nextel.
The Nextel.
With the Dodge Durango
The button.
AC
button.
AC button.
It's a beautiful episode. Like I said, it's like my number 2. It's way up there on my list. It's a fantastic episode when you start looking at what the episode entails.
Mm-hmm.
It is about going where no man has gone before. That next level of evolution
Right.
for humans, and are we truly ready for it?
No.
Young people fantasize about superhumans and superpowers, and you have different TV shows like the new one that's out right now. I think it's called Power. Who's the actor? Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, that new movie. Yes.
Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
You would find that world is not a world you really want to live in.
They actually deliver a pretty good idea that's not an ideal situation.
Because there will always be people who will use their power for their own advantage.
Oh yeah.
And if you're part of the powerless,
Well, even in modern storytelling like that, when it's done right, you get the impression you don't want to be around when two extraordinary people get into an argument.
now you guys hated this movie, and I kind of liked it, and it was Bright.
I
Bright.
never saw that.
It's the one where they had magic wands.
Harry Potter.
No,
No, you're talking with Will Smith.
Yeah, with Will
Yeah,
Smith.
I think it's Bright.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Bright.
I never saw
And
it.
it's about a world where fantasy exists, and elves are walking around, and there's actually people with magic wands. I kind of enjoyed it, but the thought of a greater race that lived for almost, that lived forever and had magic wands that can do whatever they want to with it, it wouldn't be a world you want.
See, no, this is what Tolkien did so well. See, the thing about the elves had a lot of these powers, but the thing about the elves is that they were done. They were tired.
They were separated.
Yeah, somebody that has that amount of power for that amount of time, the ultimate, what's the ultimate state that you get to is that you're kind of done. You've seen it all, you've done it all. You're not really interested anymore about anything that's going on, and you're just ticking off the last. You're like a jaded cop. You're hanging around for a pension. It's like, and then you're just gonna leave, and you don't want to get involved in things. And that was the thing about Sauron for me in Lord of the Rings, and what Tolkien was is that this is a guy that's been around for a long time, and he's still into it. He's still into dominating and power. He's still into that. And you look at the elves that have been around for a long time, and they just can't wait to leave. You know what I mean?
They're done with it.
Isn't it in that context he was still into it because he hadn't fully achieved it?
I don't know. I think his manifestations throughout the years were less than what he was, but he just wouldn't give up on it.
Well, this is Man on Trek, but.
Yeah.
Sauron had not dominated the earth fully. All his attempts have been deterred.
I think our listeners are going to probably have caught on by now that we don't just watch Star Trek, and we're liable to talk about anything. And
well,
hopefully that's a positive.
It's
thing.
in the context of the character within Trek that we're evaluating, being thou greater.
Yes.
Right, but also there's subtleties to why we picked Men on Trek. It's like it's men trying to stay on track.
Well, there's so many corollaries between Trek and other franchises.
Well, at the end of the day, you're talking about storytelling,
right? Trek takes a dive into a lot of different venues, and I was just watching the one with the gangsters.
Piece of the action.
Trek takes a dive into all these things, and people now are writing stories trying to figure out how to make the story expansive. Mm-hmm. And Trek does it. You're going from planet to planet.
You could,
and coming upon different cultures. One culture is in the Stone Age. One culture is in the Industrial Age. One culture is coming up to where you are. it gives them an opportunity to do so much else, and then they throw time travel into it, and it's, man, you can do whatever you want to with a Star Trek episode.
Well, that was the thing that people always supposedly admired most about Stanley Kubrick, is because each one of his films was in a different genre, and Star Trek actually was doing that.
Yes.
They could make a story at any time, any place, with any type of characters, and you were into it. You believed it. You were like, yeah, that's okay. I get that. You fly fast enough towards the sun and gravity and all this other stuff, and you can go back to 1960s.
Like they beam down to the planet and meet Wyatt Earp, and you don't question it.
Well, right. The ones someone had said that after the studio had filmed a particular type of movie, then they have all these props and all these costumes from the Western. So let's use those props for a Star Trek episode.
Oh, of course.
Okay, we just did a Western. Oh, the studio just filmed a gangster movie or gangster show. So let's use those things. Let's throw it into Star Trek.
The back lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the set's still there. All we got to do is move our cameras in, and
and that's great from an economic production standpoint. But it's also, can we craft an interesting story around these items?
Yeah, but once the items are there, this is one thing.
This is a question I want to raise, though. Did they look at the items and make the story? Or did they write the story and bring in the items?
I think they saw that the items were available and crafted a story in that genre. Okay, the studio just filmed a gangster movie or gangster show or whatever,
or the hundreds they filmed back in the day.
So now we have access to these props. This wasn't a limitation.
Well, that's what a good producer's going to do for a studio. They're going to look around and say, what are my resources and what do I have? And then you bring in a writer and go, hey, listen, I know you're working on this, but think about maybe coming up with a story about the OK Corral, because we've got some stuff laying around.
Right.
Good.
So a lot of shows are limited in what they can do because the cost of the props and the special effects to do those things. Now, if the studio's already got it laying around, hey, we can make the show on a pretty decent budget and not have to spend extra money.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That opens it up for what the show can do. Now, if you remember when Battlestar Galactica first started, it was $1 million. The original show was $1 million per episode. Wow. That was enormous.
Right.
Yeah, it was the most expensive TV show at the time.
But you got so sick of that Viper shooting that Cylon crab banking to the right and miss hit.
That's the same 7 scenes.
Oh,
that's because they had a limited budget. But if you can save money and produce, then you can do more.
Right.
And that frees up your writers to imagine more.
Explore other ideas.
And Star Trek came at a perfect time, and it was able to take advantage of all these things that were available to them.
Yeah,
and we reaped the benefit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Some 50 years later, and we're still enjoying it.
Well, as Kirk says to Spock in the last line, he goes, well, there's still hope for us. Here at Men on Trek.
Yeah, there's still some hope for us. So, I think we've thoroughly covered where no man has gone before. We went a few places that we hadn't gone before. But that's going to happen from time to time. You should stay on your toes and give us some feedback. Hit like and subscribe. And we'll be back again soon with episode number 7. And try to guess which episode we'll cover next. There's clues in this episode, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But try to figure it out and let us know what you think.
And we're still looking for you to send that movie reference in.
Yeah, I want 200 answers to that question, minimal. And I'm going to make Mark read them all. But this is Men on Trek, and we are signing off.
Thank you.